Hello, good evening, and welcome to our special live coverage with tonight's live broadcast on the Gala dinner. I'm Uli Herri and my partner here.
I'm Siska Becker.
And today becomes one of the most important days in the country's democracy with the official inauguration of Prabowo Subianto as Indonesia's 8th president and Vice President Gibran Rakabuming Raka. The inauguration ceremony took place this morning, which took place in Senayan Parliament Complex, Jakarta.
That's right, Uli. It was a historical day and it marks a new chapter for Indonesia. And next, the agenda after the inauguration, President Prabowo headed to the Merdeka Palace. And during the trip to Merdeka Palace, as we all saw during the report that we extensively covered, he greeted the public who attended the Pesta Rakyat or People's Party that was held along the street leading to Merdeka Palace. Now, at the State Palace, a farewell and welcoming ceremony for President Joko Widodo and President-elect Prabowo Subianto, who was already president at that time, was held. And a number of state guests also attended the event. So it was very festive, very joyful. It was a great day for all Indonesians. As for tonight, there will be a gala dinner for heads of state with a number of invited state guests who attended also the inauguration ceremony that was held earlier this morning at the People's Consultative Assembly. And of course, what we heard so far,
Yes.
President Prabowo Subianto is set to announce the Prabowo-Gibran cabinet lineup this very evening.
Hopefully at 9 p.m.
That's
today.
what we heard, yeah.
And now we have with us here in the studio our expert guests, Dina Prapto Raharja, political observer of Synergy Policies, and Ian Betts, managing partner, Castle Asia. Thank you for being here, Budina, and also Ian. Thank you for being here.
Ian, for being here on a Sunday evening.
Yes, on this lovely Sunday. Now, before we go into our conversation today, let's begin our special coverage, beginning with this morning's inauguration ceremony. Prabowo Subianto and Gibran Rakabuming Raka have taken the oath of office as the country's new president and vice president.
With the oath-taking, Prabowo Gibran are now officially leading Indonesia for the 2024 to 2029 period. The oath-taking ceremony took place during the People's Consultative Assembly's plenary session at MPR-DPR building, Senayan, this morning. First, President Subianto took the oath, followed by Vice President Raka. Here's the oath of the President, recited by Prabowo Subianto.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Demi Allah, saya bersumpah akan memenuhi kewajiban Presiden Republik Indonesia dengan sebaik-baiknya dan seadil-adilnya, memegang teguh Undang-Undang Dasar dan menjalankan segala undang-undang dan peraturannya dengan selurus-lurusnya, serta berbakti kepada nusa dan bangsa.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Demi Allah, saya bersumpah akan memenuhi kewajiban Wakil Presiden Republik Indonesia dengan sebaik-baiknya dan seadil-adilnya, memegang teguh Undang-Undang Dasar dan menjalankan segala undang-undang dan peraturannya dengan selurus-lurusnya, serta berbakti kepada nusa dan bangsa.
After the inauguration, the new president delivered a speech. In his speech, the president called on everyone to work hard, fight tirelessly, and safeguard Indonesia's wealth. According to President Subianto, in politics, such things are easy to say but difficult to achieve. President Prabowo Subianto once again called on everyone to build the future together despite differences in ethnicity, religion, party, or group.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim.
History's been made this morning. The ceremony began earlier this morning, and Siska Baker is covering from 7 until 2 p.m. So it was exciting, right?
I'm entering my 8th hour of broadcast today, but very happy to be here,
Yes.
very excited indeed. That's why I have my prettiest batik skirt and my party shoes on.
Looking
just
sharp,
for this
Siska Baker.
special report.
As sharp as our guests
Yes,
for
indeed.
this evening.
Very excited to pick your
Surely
brains.
they've been also paying attention to the coverage.
I think that's the first question we have to ask
Let's go,
our
Siska.
guests, their thoughts on the inauguration ceremony and all the festivities that have happened today on this historical day for Indonesia's journey as a democratic nation. Budina, what are your thoughts on it?
I guess the first thing I catch from the entire ceremony was a very happy feeling from President Prabowo Subianto.
Yeah.
Not only he was so comfortable in his
Element.
he's been waiting for this
Yeah.
moment for long, I
Yeah.
think,
Right.
and he is very prepared. He welcomed all guests, and in myself, you know, as an individual, as an Indonesian citizen, I feel a relief because it's been a long time waiting since March that he was announced.
We had 8 months.
8
to
months
wait.
to wait,
Yeah.
and there's been roller coaster moments among Indonesians.
Yeah.
If you follow Indonesian politics,
Yeah.
we saw so
covered
many
each of the
things.
steps, Budina, together.
Each of the steps together. So it's like, finally we get
Yeah.
here.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's my first reaction.
Okay. And how
Okay.
about the speech? Did you see the entirety of the speech?
I did, and I
Okay.
even take notes of every little thing, because so I thought in his speech he wants to show himself that he is the leader that all Indonesians can trust. He is a dependable man, a statesman
Yeah.
that unified Indonesia. I think that's the key message
Yeah.
that he wants to portray. He specifically said that I'm the president not only for those who elect me, but for everyone.
Right.
Okay.
So he highlighted also his priority programs, which we can dissect one by one later on today. But I guess in general, he wants to show that not only he's very knowledgeable about international politics,
Yeah.
he greeted everyone, every dignitary, envoys and heads of states attending the ceremony. And he said that Indonesia needs to be out there internationally. So that's a departure from what we are used to see in the past 10 years.
Okay, yeah, he mentioned a lot of big plans for Indonesia in the upcoming years for his presidency.
Right,
How
yeah.
about- what about
I
you?
think it's a remarkably efficient program, very short, very fast moving, very well run and organized when you consider how many dignitaries had to arrive in their limousines,
Yeah.
be taken in greeting, escorted through a very complicated and sophisticated event. Remarkable to see the recent post-reform history of Indonesia really decked out on that series of chairs. We had presidents and vice presidents,
Yeah.
and even recent presidential candidates, all there, all greeting each other, greeting the new
Yeah.
president and vice president. So a great show of unity, a great show of respect by President Prabowo as well, as he named them one by one during his speech, referred to their contribution to the nation in order almost. So a great deal of respect to those who've gone before him in this role, a long-awaited role for President Prabowo. We're all aware of that. This is a man who's been decades in waiting for the presidency. But also, as Dina said, you know, this was a very internationalist position. We haven't seen Indonesia really encapsulated in a speech like this for a very, very long time. The president was able to recite and recall the names, often very long, of each dignitary, each
Yes.
ambassador,
Yeah.
each head of state. 19 ambassadors, 16 heads of state, thereabouts, who were there. Each one was greeted with the same degree of respect and detail. So this is a man, this is a president who is committed to diplomacy and to the international ways. I think, as Dina said, we heard during the speech a lot of headline policy positions being named, being highlighted, from climate change to poverty alleviation to the history of Indonesia as a post-colonial nation, for example, recovered from that, but not forgetting that, and very much marking that in his speech. So these are the elements that I think really resounded through that speech.
Although there are also things that he omit saying in the speech as well, which we will get back into later on.
Just as interesting.
And now let's move on to another news. Dignitaries from 33 friendly countries witnessed the swearing in of the nation's 8th President Prabowo Subianto and 30th Vice President Gibran Raka Buming Raka Sunday morning, replacing President Joko Widodo and Vice President Ma'ruf Amin.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim.
Prabowo and Gibran took their oaths of office for the 2024 to 2029 leadership term at around 10:30 a.m. local time during inauguration held at Nusantara Building in Senayan. People's Consultative Assembly Speaker Ahmad Muzani confirmed attendance of dignitaries from ASEAN countries, its dialogue partners, and other friendly nations. Speaking to journalists on Saturday, Muzani stated the presence of dignitaries from 33 friendly countries at the presidential inauguration demonstrated great respect for Indonesia. Among those witnessing the swearing-in were Malaysia's Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim, Timor-Leste's Prime Minister Sanana Gusmao, Vanuatu's Prime Minister Charlotte Bimasmas, Brunei Darussalam Sultan Hassanal Bolkiah, Laos Vice President Apani Yathutu, and Vietnam's VP Vo Tien Xuan. Qatar's Deputy Prime Minister Dr. Khalid bin Mohammed Al Attiyah, Russia's First Deputy Prime Minister Denis Manturov, China's Vice President Han Zheng, and former German President Christian Wolff were also in attendance. Muzani remarked the number of countries sending representatives to the inauguration is so large that Indonesia felt honored as a nation. The swearing-in of Prabowo and Gibran was also witnessed by former President Susilo Bambang Yudhoyono and several former vice presidents, including Yusuf Gala, alongside approximately 1,100 guests. Meanwhile, Presidential Secretary Chief Heru Budi Hartono stated earlier the inauguration drew participation from 20 state guests, an envoy from the United Nations, and 13 special envoys representing heads of state. On Sunday evening, according to Muzani, in his capacity as Secretary General of Prabowo-led Gerindra Party, President Prabowo Subianto planned to unveil composition of his ministerial cabinet.
So there you have it, a proud moment for all of us Indonesians, because we get to enjoy a peaceful transfer of power. Very smooth. And also, it's quite a privilege, actually, to have that kind of peaceful transitions, considering not all countries in the world can have that, even in the region or even in advanced countries. You can remember some countries experience some hardships when it comes to
especially in the current geopolitical climate that we're having in the global world. You know?
That's true. So to continue conversation with our guest, you mentioned about the things that you highlighted in the speech. How about the things that you think were missed out on the speech, that you wish were discussed or included in the speech?
He explained a lot of why things are important and why it's then highlighted, but he didn't mention how. A lot of the things that he mentioned, I understand it's very important. It's been not only part of his campaign message, but also the campaign message of other candidates. But he didn't quite say how he's going to make that happen.
So not as technical as his predecessor.
No. So which I think, you know, probably in this kind of moment, that's the kind of speech he thinks will draw attention to him instead of, you know, his cabinet or, you know, how he will do. I guess he just really want to settle in the moment that this is a very glorious time for Indonesia and for him. He wants to, I very much highlighted the part that he put the dignitaries from ASEAN on the front lines before everybody else from outside of ASEAN regions. And you notice that all ASEAN member states came except Myanmar. And then the first another set of dignitaries that was that attended was from China, and then Russia, and then far behind was US, UK, and then Australia. So I thought, I don't know if
something is implied there. You think?
You know, if rows of seats mean something, does it mean anything?
Okay.
You know, that's one thing. But he wants to really show that he will be very active, and regardless of what's going on in Indonesia and what may happen because of the how question I was asking about, Indonesia will stand there and bring solidarity among people of various nations. I think he was very passionate about making sure that Indonesia will be among the oppressed, not just in Indonesia, but also beyond. And he mentioned Palestine.
So Indonesia is the big brother of Southeast Asia or something?
Maybe, maybe. And also among the oppressed. I think he was very passionate about making sure that all of us in this very happy moment is not forgetting about those who are left behind, those who suffer, those who are elders but still need to work. I think it's kind of interesting because his background is not only military man but also from a wealthy family, that he wants to show that kind of gesture.
So at the, we got informed that he's been having a bilateral meeting as well. As of now, he's been meeting with the Singapore Prime Minister, and also from Papua New Guinea as well. So that probably shows also his priorities.
Yeah, I think he's enacting what he calls the good neighbor policy. Good neighbor policy.
Which he mentions also in the speech.
To have a good relationship with everyone. Like he mentioned repeatedly how he wants to keep neutrality with foreign relations. But at the same time, what we've been seeing so far, I mean, in July, he went to see President Vladimir Putin in Russia, and the first foreign visit that he'll make will be to China. Now, again, implications and, you know, things that are being done and not said always have some weight in the world of diplomacy. What do you think all these maneuvers actually mean?
Exactly. He put down all those puzzles for us to still reflect. If we want to go beyond just the speech today, we do have to wonder how he's going to do all of that, given that there's also lots of homeworks here at home in Indonesia. I would imagine that his approach will be elite engagements. He not only saves money but also bring Indonesia forward as the big leader in the global stage. So you get something out of one approach. So those bilateral meetings, you will see a lot. I think that's one of his approach. And then he would look for big events where he will give speech and share his ideas for the world. I think we have to anticipate that that will be the Indonesian stature in the next 5 years.
Okay. Ian, your thoughts?
Sure. Well, I think, you know, we've explored this idea of regionalism, and I think it's clear that the emphasis will be on the region first, ASEAN and Asia, and then the rest of the world. We have APEC coming up, so we will expect to see the president traveling to APEC soon.
Peru.
And also COP29, we expect to see a strong representation there. The president did speak about climate change briefly in the speech. There were also references to renewable energy, so we know there's an interest there. They'll be borne out in COP29. Indonesia is still working towards JETP and the negotiations and plans that need to be put in place for the retirement of coal-fired power stations, etc., and other conditions that will fulfill the requirements for JETP. But perhaps if we look at that speech, had the speech been made by President Jokowi, one of the elements that would have been in it would have been the new IKN Nusantara.
Right.
And we didn't hear a reference to
not.
IKN Nusantara.
He did not mention.
We're already aware that the budget for 2025 has been set by this parliament. It's been, by the outgoing parliament, it's been approved by the government, Ministry of Finance, etc. So we know what we have in the budget for next year. The budget for IKN Nusantara is reduced from this year, so we do expect to see a slowdown, a deceleration there. So perhaps already at this early stage, we're seeing a drawing away from perhaps some of the very marked continuity that's been talked about in the transition from President Jokowi to President Prabowo. That's not to say that Nusantara won't go ahead, but perhaps the pace will be slower than it has been under President Jokowi. So a bit of a change there. We also haven't seen, though President Prabowo was very generous in his praise and respect for the outgoing Vice President Mapruf, there was no real mention of what Vice President Gibran Rakabuming Raka will be doing in this administration. So obviously this is the first speech, and as Dina said, this was really setting the scene. This is the president staking his place on the national stage and the international stage for the first time. So there's plenty of time for that to be borne out. But it'll be interesting to see what roles and tasks the Vice President is given, whether he'll be given tasks in digital transformation, the youth dividend, the youth demographic, startups, etc., perhaps the nutrition program and some of the human capital development that has been talked about during the presidential campaign and since. But yeah, a little bit more flesh on the bones, a bit more substance required there.
So we can expect a lot of lobbying probably will be happening tonight at the Merdeka Palace, and we have been informed that people are starting to arrive as well at the Merdeka Palace at this moment. Earlier, the Prime Minister of Vanuatu just arrived, and the gala dinner surely will be starting in about half an hour from now.
Yes.
And will last for 2 hours, and then at 9 p.m. we expect the announcement of the cabinet of Mr. Prabowo Subianto.
That's the expected agenda. So although it's a Sunday, but the new president has been working really hard on his first day in the office.
It's been a long day. It's been a long day for him as well.
So Ian, to follow up on your previous comments, as we heard as well in Prabowo Subianto's speech there at the MPR building, he mentioned about his plan in increasing the economic growth in Indonesia, which has been relatively stable for the past 10 years with 5% economic growth, excluding the pandemic years, but he wants to increase that to 8% per year. And he says he can achieve that in 3 to 4 years' time. Now, according to your expertise and knowledge, do you think that is feasible?
Well, that's been a polemic, and it's been taken apart over recent weeks. We've seen some support for it, quite vigorous support for it among government, of course, as you'd expect, but also Bappenas, Kadin, both have announced their plans to move towards this 8%, strategies for it. There are plans for a phased approach towards 8% to achieve it by within 3 years, and then slightly phased down in order to consolidate a very solid and an economy that can be retained over the 5 years. And also a slightly longer 5-year plan to achieve that 8-year growth. Many believe it's possible. Indonesia is poised to become the 5th largest economy in the world by 2030. It's already the 4th largest population in the world. It's achieved that 5% growth and managed to retain it throughout the crises that the president mentioned, COVID-19, the supply chain crisis that was prompted by the Ukraine war, that impacted many nations around the world so severely. Indonesia weathered those storms reasonably well. As the president said, didn't go into lockdown as strictly as many other countries during COVID-19, and yet still managed to retain almost 5% during COVID and now exceeding 5% for the last year. So the question is, can they really move towards that 8%? Possibly yes.
Possibly yes.
In my view, it's going to require a very significant move on the government towards regulatory reform. In order to achieve the foreign direct investment inflows that are going to be required to support that growth, I think the government might need to be considering what kinds of reform measures it needs to put in place in order to make investment more attractive. Many of the other countries within ASEAN who are present today, Vietnam and Thailand, they've benefited from long-standing industrial strategies that have resulted in enormous industrial parks, industrial zones where there are tax benefits and other incentives for investment. Indonesia doesn't have so many of those incentives. And there are many reasons for that. It also, among them, the archipelago nature of this country, the enormously expensive transportation and logistics that are part of the supply chain here, make supply to industrial estates and the transport of goods very expensive. A very high component in the price of produced goods is their transportation and logistics. So I'm hoping the government will be open to, and the new cabinet will be open to, regulatory reform measures that go beyond the big ticket items that the president has already announced. For example, the emphasis on downstreaming. Downstreaming is one thing, and it may be very good for encompassing the raw materials and commodities that Indonesia has enjoyed for so many years, and rather than selling them as export commodities abroad, but to retain the value in country. But to retain that value and to build those high-value products, we need investors, and we need them in automation. We need them in high technology. And for those investors to come in, we're going to need some reform in order to attract them. So perhaps these ministers, investment, trade, industry, labor, others, may need to look at how to attract them. Local content regulations may be one where we might like to see some relaxation of the current rigidity. Perhaps also import restrictions, a greater strategic discussion of what import restrictions actually do to the manufacturing process here in country and the impact they have on the manufacture of high-value goods for export. This has been a major factor for business over the course of the last year. So perhaps that kind of focus is what we'd like to see, ideally.
Okay.
And that would all move us towards the 8%.
Okay. Now, it's, before we delve into the foreign policy side of the conversation, let's move on to another news package that we have.
Yes, the newly inaugurated President Prabowo Subianto underlined his commitment to continue prioritizing the interest of people over the interests of groups. Let's take a closer look on this statement.
In his inaugural speech after being sworn in as 8th President at Nusantara Building in Senayan Legislative Complex, Prabowo said he and Vice President Gibran Rakabuming Raka will dedicate their lives to the interest of the nation. The commitment was made considering Indonesian people's long and hard struggle through various challenges to achieve independence. Therefore, he said he will uphold the oath he has taken as best as he can, as mandated by the Constitution. Prabowo and Gibran took the oath of office for the 2024 to 2029 term during a plenary session at the MPR at Nusantara Building. Wearing suits and traditional Betawi cloth, they took the oath on the Holy Book of the Quran. Gibran took the oath as Vice President next. Afterward, both signed the inauguration minutes. At least 709 of the 731 members of MPR witnessed the oath-taking. The plenary session of the MPR was also attended by national figures, political party leaders, and representatives of friendly countries. At least 20 heads of state-level officials and 18 ministerial-level officials joined the inauguration ceremony.
We now continue our conversation with our guests, and now switching to Ibu Dina. Before we go discussing about the foreign policy, I want to get your take on this issue that has been one of the biggest talking points in recent days, and that is the potential cabinet lineup that we're still waiting for anxiously. So to piggyback on a statement made by Ian earlier, that we need regulatory reform. But at the same time, we've been hearing that the number of ministers and ministries will expand quite significantly.
Yeah.
What do you think of this, Budina?
So, slightly different from Ian, I would like to say I'm more cautious about having such an ambitious target of 8% growth. One of the reasons why I say this, because it's not about just our determination, but about how the market will respond to Indonesia and how we have resources to deliver to the market as well. If you notice the market situation at this point, Indonesia serves as one of the largest markets in the world. So being a market means that we need to have very strong consumer capacity
Right.
to buy, you know.
Yeah.
And the reality has been our capacity to, the middle class especially, has been shrinking.
Right.
And there are various reasons why it's the case. One of the things is exactly what he mentioned earlier, Pa Ian mentioned, the structural challenges for the middle class and for the lower class to upgrade their living standards. The living cost of Indonesian, average Indonesian people will be spent on commuting to work and also for education, for food, all the things that needs, well, you would assume that with the very populist Joko Widodo's era, this will be settled. But you know, there's not much structural change that has happened. Instead, in the very last second period of Joko Widodo's administrations, you see lots and lots of activities has nothing to do with distributing more for the people. It's more about creating the IKN and then also creating downstreaming program that in reality, we have to be honest, it doesn't create much job also for Indonesians. I would imagine if we didn't have some digital opportunities, for instance, for people, maybe our life in Indonesian, average Indonesian citizens will be even worse because the tool to be entrepreneur, to gain income without being employed will be less. So that's the first setting, you know. Us in the international world, our capacity to buy is shrinking. And then domestically, if you're talking about being stronger in growth, you need to produce. You cannot just, you know, expect you can export something and gain currency reserve from it without producing something of value added, high value added for the world. Now, we haven't spent enough on research and development for innovation. The education system, to be honest, a lot of Indonesian universities, for instance, are private universities instead of public universities. And we're still lacking infrastructure also for public high schools and middle schools. There's not enough for everybody for getting affordable education and quality education. So how are we going to sustain, you know, in the long run really depends on how he set the tone differently in the next 5 years. And the outcome may not be immediate as he promised in
so
3
not in the
4
next
years.
5 years?
I would imagine, you know, because it requires lots of competing priority then in the budget. If you want to spend more on building swasembada pangan, you know, the
food security,
food security
food
and then
estate.
energy security. You need a lot of money for that because you need to rearrange, you know, where people planting and then maybe giving incentives to businesses. Then what's going to happen with all these basic priorities that, you know, we cannot wait anymore, you know, for this. Indonesians' youth and labor, it's beyond 120 million. It's, if you imagine us compared to Singapore, for instance, how many times that number is compared to their population. That's just a huge number of individuals waiting out there to get a different touch from our government. So I think we need to be more cautious, not, you know, be more wise in responding to his speech and make sure that he is he's very realistic and we need, I think it's our call then as experts, as citizens, not to just let it go to him and expect his cabinet to all of that, because there may be big challenges.
A lot of homeworks. A lot of homeworks. How about Indonesia's position in the constellation of the world economy order at the moment? How do you see our position? What are the challenges and the risks that we're facing as a nation?
So the path that Joko Widodo chose in the last 10 years was to make sure that Indonesia provide all the basic infrastructures necessary in short term as fast as possible, basically.
Right.
So that's the big the big investment that Indonesia expects to get, so that in the next few years it will be, return on investment being collected. He didn't quite expect that the economy of the world will slow down and then the geopolitics would get worse, and then the fighting among countries become open war. So the question is really about how we pay back some of those debt based to do all the big investment that we've done. So that's one thing. So I think in the eye of the population of the other countries, we are good partners for very attractive place, because we now have infrastructure. We have good very welcoming capital city in Jakarta, for instance. We don't see yet in IKN, but a very promising place that if we say we want to do something, it can be fast. It can be done very fast. But another thing is, the world doesn't just see that. They expect Indonesia to become more and more of the market. So we need to be really strong in consumer power, and so we may negotiate on the various peaceful peace negotiation, for instance, but then other countries would expect, what can you do for us in return? What kind of take and give that we can create to make sure that both of us have a win-win situation? Now that's the tough part. So I myself, as a practitioner in diplomacy, I don't see rhetorics is sufficient anymore.
Okay.
It's really the time for us to negotiate a very tough negotiation. What do you get from it? What others get from it? And then set the fallback position that everybody can accept.
Right, so to set out a realistic plan.
Very realistic
that we
plan.
can actually realize.
Sometimes even short term,
Okay.
It's not so far off as you imagine.
Okay.
I saw Ian nodding. Maybe you have some thoughts?
Sure. No, absolutely agree. And you talk about trade and trading nations. One advantage that other ASEAN economies have is that a number of them, Thailand and Vietnam, have an extensive number of FTAs with other countries. So they can much more freely exchange goods, imports and exports with them. Indonesia struggled to build those FTAs. We're not sure what the President's position will be on those going forward. But if we are going to move towards a higher GDP, and within a remarkably short period, like 5 years, for example, then we're going to need to be trading faster and in a much more concentrated way. It's going to require production, and production can only come about if we have domestic production as well as foreign direct investment. We've got to attract those companies in with benefits and incentives, so that mean they'll want to come and build and take labor competitively in Indonesia. Indonesian labor is competitive from a price point, but it's not as competitive in terms of productivity. Foreign direct investors will look primarily for productivity.
Meaning skill-wise?
Yes, skill as well as productivity of work per day. So productivity can be measured in workers across different countries. Indonesian workers don't have the productivity that workers in other Asian countries can attain. So that's another challenge, building productivity. The way to do that is through human capital development, through education, through better health, through the infrastructure that we're already starting to see being built now.
But that's a little bit long-term, no?
That's a long-term program. It's a long-term strategy. You could do a lot within 5 years if you're dynamic and fast-moving and you have a highly collaborative cabinet and all parties with you, as the President has today. But it's going to be a very hard task to achieve that, and it's going to require a great deal of cooperation.
Okay. I would like to add, because you asked earlier about the size of the cabinet that's growing, right? And I'm thinking, if a country wants to be successful, one of the things that we need to grow is the G, the big G, right? The government spending to intervene in various strategic programs. But if you have large cabinet to work with, is it going to be sportive or counterproductive?
Yes.
Not only because...
That's the big question.
Yeah, because the big cabinets require lots of budget. But the capacity of Indonesians to pay for tax has not been increasing. And we've seen many kinds of discourse about how the government going to create more income through tax, and we got panicked. Especially the middle income, lower income. It's like, how can you apply such tax on top of the current tax that we already have?
And so to actually create a specific body to deal with the tax revenue, something like the IRS in the US,
like the IRS,
right?
because they thought digitalization would, you know, bring more results, bring more income. But you know, it's like, I really hope that all this new policy is not going to oppress the middle income even further, because this is the machine for growth in Indonesia. You need the middle income to grow instead of being suppressed.
All right. How about you, Ian? Based on the data that you have, big government or small government, which suited better for Indonesia?
Here's the thing. We're looking at an economy which is essentially run on subsidies. So, you know, the main commodity fuel is very heavily subsidized for the people. That brings a distortion into the analysis of the economy. It's going to be interesting to see what the president and his cabinet will do with those subsidies. Releasing subsidies and causing fuel to rise at either market rates or at higher prices is going to be very unpopular and a very difficult thing to accept.
And that's why it's rarely done by
very
Indonesian
rarely
presidents.
done and done and met with great unpopularity when it has been done in the past. Previous presidents have noted. So subsidies is remarkably expensive, trillions of rupiah every year. A very difficult thing to remove. But while they're there, they distort the economy. If, as is rumored, Ibu Sri Mulyani is retained in the cabinet, when we're not sure, whether it hasn't been announced or confirmed yet, then you know, the discussion about the new revenue body should be taken up in earnest, and we'll see whether that goes ahead as the president has indicated he wishes to see. As Dina said, there has been a major focus on the tax base. Indonesia has one of the lowest tax bases in ASEAN and the Asia region. And there is a great deal more to expand that tax base in the corporate sphere. But to tax the middle class more would be, you know, another challenge for that core productive component of society, the engine of society, those people who are producing the highest degree of value in society. They're already at the pinch point now. So it's going to be a very sensitive discussion.
So at 9 p.m. supposedly we will have the announcement of the cabinet ministers, and you mentioned earlier about the finance minister that we're going to have. What will the choice of the finance minister impact the trust and the confidence of the other countries and investors in Indonesia?
From my perspective, and looking at this over the last few days and weeks, there's been a great deal of anticipation. I think one of the positive elements is the president appears to be open to input, and he's been actively seeking that input. There's been rounds of meetings, forums, seminars, etc., where he and his teams, his key officers, have been seeking input from bodies who are giving him their insights and suggestions and proposals for the economy and for the coming administration. Very good, very receptive. If, as is strongly rumored, Ibu Sri Mulyani is retained as finance minister, if that's successful, it might indicate that President Prabowo has been listening to that advice. Because certainly, when those rumors became more apparent in recent days with the meetings at Kartanegara, etc., we saw the stock market rise in value, we saw the rupiah stabilize, we saw indications of investor sentiment more optimistic, more positive. All the indices were up for Indonesia in the days following that. So it shows two things: that the president's listening to that input, and that he's acting on that input. And if he's able to retain that kind of talent to this cabinet, it's an optimistic sign for foreign direct investment.
So Prabowo had people coming into Kertanegara, and also he had sessions at Hambalang as well.
For the past few days, he's been
Right.
quite busy meeting with people.
Right. So that's quite interesting. Your thoughts on those?
Okay. So adding into that issue about Sri Mulyani coming in or not and the implications, right? I think one of the things that Sri Mulyani is, her credential is with the West, is her background was with the World Bank, and he had good relationship with various Western countries. So one of the things that has been anticipated internationally is that with all this program of subsidy and food, free food for kids and all, investors are thinking, where's the money going to come from? Are you going to manage to ensure that the macro economic figures remain stable and all, and how everybody's going to deal with the debt that's going to be due next year. So having someone like Sri Mulyani who knew what had happened and can bridge, at least if not for the entire 5 years, she may stay for just 1 year maybe to transition, because as we know, the vice president, the vice minister of finance is also very close to the family of Prabowo Subianto. So usually the bridging is what he needs. And then notice also that a lot of money has been coming from China lately, various kinds of investments and also technologies that we use, even the halte, the what do you call it? The bus stops for Transjakarta, for instance, have been imported from China and things like that. So you notice that we need to also make sure that our current partners are not going away because of the new transition in Indonesia. So Sri Mulyani is, the bridge at this moment. For that situation.
The logical choice.
Logical
for
choice.
the moment.
For the moment.
Okay, a lot of responsibility for Ibu Sri Mulyani, but yeah, we sure hope that she can handle it just fine. Now we are getting live feed from the Merdeka Palace. As we can see, state guests are still coming in. They are getting ready with the gala dinner. And as it is mentioned, this gala dinner is a way for Prabowo Subianto as the new president to appreciate the leaders of the state who have come in to attend the inauguration, to show his appreciation for their support. So this is diplomacy at work, Budina,
diplomacy at work,
as we can see. So foreign policy is a big part of his plan as president. Now, maybe before we delve into the finer details, maybe you can give us a general assessment of how is Indonesia standing right now? What are the biggest homework, the most pressing matters in terms of international relations that the new administration should focus on, in your opinion?
Okay, now I want to go into the tough part.
Okay.
Because
here we go.
We're bracing ourselves.
You've been waiting for this?
Hold on to our seats for this.
Because earlier we talked about good neighbor policy. And as I said, all member states of ASEAN were there. The state leaders are there, except Myanmar. So Myanmar here didn't get any mention. Prabowo mentioned Palestine instead. So I was wondering, I hope the attention to Palestine is not just a FOMO, kind of trying to fear of being missing out because everybody's talking about it. Because in our neck of the wood, there's that problem of Myanmar. And Myanmar is such a complex issue. Number one, there's a big conflicts ongoing. It's also about democracy that's unsettled. And it's also about poverty that's been created. But at the same time, you see that those neighboring countries attending, whose leaders are attending, have become the largest investors for Myanmar. Singapore is the largest investors, taking over China in the last year, and then followed by Vietnam, Thailand. So these countries are big investors in Myanmar. So the problem of Myanmar doesn't stop, doesn't solve. Nobody in ASEAN meeting quite address the problem. But investments continue coming, mostly from ASEAN member states. So I was wondering, how is he going to handle this as a good neighbor? Are you going to do exactly what other member states are also doing? Very pragmatic, and just take more capitalistic approach in the Myanmar, and because one of the issue here is that the world trying to what do you call that, split Myanmar to become just economic entities that benefit whoever invests in Myanmar without thinking about the unity of the country? Or are we really concerned about the messages that we have aired in the past 5 years about Myanmar, part of ASEAN, about the people of Myanmar? So it's really a big question mark for me. If you're a good neighbor, what stand do you choose? The neighbor that's very close and send Rohingyas, refugees into our neck of the wood, what do you do with it? So that's because everybody's there. It's just wondering. And then going further, I noticed European countries and America are there.
Right.
And of course, everybody's also waiting anxiously about the November election in the US. So I too wait for the result. But in general, I don't think there will be much difference between the policy of Trump and Kamala Harris.
When it comes to relationship with Indonesia, right?
Yeah.
It's somewhat the same.
Somewhat the same. But the consequences of their approach to Israel, to Middle Eastern countries, to China, needs to be responded. And one of the very immediate problem that we have to face is the South China Sea problem. I think if Prabowo is, applying a very proud approach of being Indonesia and sovereign nation and all, he needs to be really tactful and make sure that we are not put in a very difficult position to respond after something bad happens. So we need to really put intelligence on the spot in Natuna and neighboring areas, and even in our neighboring countries like the Philippines, who are facing constant pressure from China, so that we don't have to deal only after bad facts have happened. So that's just another resources that we have to imagine spending.
I mean, you mentioned about this tricky relationship that Indonesia has with China, with our dependence on their investment as for now, but we also have the US-China tension going on with each of them posturing in the region. How can we balance that, Budina? How would you suggest the next administration walk that thin line?
I think in general, it's about being tactical. While at the back, we also, please make a real strategy. This is what has been missing. We have been tactful and we're quite good at it, but in terms of strategy, we're missing out. I think in terms of China relation, maybe 80% of our relationship will be mostly economic, but 20% will be still military and defense. And to do so, we have to balance it with the US policy in the region. Lots will be maybe on military and defense because AUKUS was there. The presence of AUKUS leaders were in the room during Prabowo's inauguration. And then another 20% maybe because the US is not quite keen in doing a pivot of economic approach, economic relation or engagement with Asian countries. So we may not have much room to maneuver there. The key is who will be the next Indonesian ambassador in the US. Joko Widodo was very, sorry to say, reckless in abandoning that position for so many years. It is our eyes and ears, and our power, ability to lobby the U.S. starts from there. And you cannot expect ministers and various kinds of ministers, as Ian mentioned. We need to Ministry of Investment, Ministry of Trade, Ministry of Industry, all of these ministries plus Ministry of Defense needs to deal with the U.S. So if you don't do the homework really well, planning ahead, using the information from our ambassador there, then how are we going to get?
So in an ideal world, what kind of person would be a great candidate for the U.S. ambassador?
In my view, somebody who understands U.S. politics really well and have the experience to penetrate the Congress and the US politicians.
Someone who's familiar with the political
Very
system,
familiar.
know the people there, and feel comfortable to do all kinds of lobbying
Yes.
for Indonesia. Okay, we just heard from the live feed that he's now meeting with a representative from Laos government. So again, ASEAN relationship is at the forefront on this very first evening of his foreign diplomacy at work in action.
So back to Ian, I feel like you have something to say. You've been nodding.
Yeah, I mean, I think the last two ASEAN summits, we've been waiting for a turnaround on Myanmar. ASEAN did issue a 5-point plan for Myanmar. Very little of that has actually been achieved. Perhaps the expectations for ASEAN as an organization aren't too high, but the fact that so little has been achieved on that front means that, you know, the trading relationships and investment as the conflict goes on have now come to the fore, and we're starting to see a greater economic focus now than perhaps a conflict resolution focus as we were initially focused on in the first 2 years. So that's a concern for Myanmar in particular. And you know, as we start to see opposition to the junta strengthen in the country now, we're likely to see that conflict deepen with all the impact that has on outflows of refugees and more violence and casualties among the population. So deep concern there for a core member of ASEAN. But really the story is the relationship between Indonesia and China. Indonesia is not a disputant to the South China Sea in a formal sense, in the way that Vietnam and the Philippines are. Philippines won a significant judicial victory in 2016 against China in The Hague in the International Court. That hasn't quite been implemented to the full right that the Philippines was granted at that time, and that's because of the relationship between the Philippines and China. But Indonesia has been impacted by the incursions by Chinese vessels into the waters of the Natuna Islands, one of Indonesia's most important and oil-rich and resource-rich maritime areas. So that's a significant concern. President Prabowo, as he is now, as Minister of Defense, did sail out on frigates in the past in order to present that very significant front to China, that this would not be tolerated. And Indonesia is a very important country for China, for BRI projects, Belt and Road initiatives, the Whoosh train, for example, extensions of that, other extensive infrastructure projects in the country. So Indonesia will be a customer for BRI projects for China. So the relationship is a complicated one. And again, as Dina mentioned, AUKUS has been a sensitivity for Indonesia. Straddling that discussion, that maritime discussion, nuclear submarines, etc., is a sensitivity for Indonesia, which is highly attuned to the importance and significance of its waters as an archipelago and its position, strategic position in Asia. It's also resisted the terminology, the Indo-Pacific, in order not to be seen to be siding with any one camp in either a pro-China position or a pro-US position. So these ambassadors and the Minister of Foreign Affairs will be key. We had a very competent and far-reaching Minister of Foreign Affairs previously, who's just outgoing in Retno Marsudi, a veteran diplomat, a career diplomat, who flew the flag for Indonesia in many fora around the world during her tenure. We've yet to see who is going to be confirmed. But if we look at the key credentials for ministerial candidates in this cabinet, it's loyalty to President Prabowo and the cabinet, professionalism and integrity. So we expect to see a candidate emerge who will be loyal to the president. So it could be someone who is in the Gerindra party or one of the close coalition members, certainly someone who's professional, we would hope, and someone of great integrity. But it's got to be someone who is worldly, who understands the geopolitical tensions to which Indonesia is subject, as are many other nations around the world, and to be able to walk that talk in the diplomatic halls and lobbies of the world, in COP29, in APEC, and in all the other fora, conferences, and world gatherings that we'd like to see during the early years of this administration.
Okay. I want to probe you further on U.S.-Indonesia relations, as it was mentioned earlier by Ibu Dina. Now, we know that we are kind of inching away from the U.S. right now, and the U.S. itself is right now tangled up in their own internal election problems. But do you think that we should still pursue investment opportunities from the U.S.? Is there any merit in pursuing it right now?
There absolutely is, and I believe the U.S. is one of the leaders in the industries which Indonesia wishes to attract, and which many of its competitors in ASEAN are succeeding to draw to their countries. We're seeing Intel, Foxconn, we're seeing Samsung, the production of Google devices in ASEAN countries very successfully taking off. We are seeing computer devices, chip industries, semiconductor chip industries now being drawn into Malaysia and other ASEAN countries. Indonesia is seeing very little of this. We've got to analyze why that is, and that's why I focus on the regulatory reform that we need to see for industry, investment, trade, perhaps also labor, in order to allow this caliber of company, this degree of automation and high-tech industry coming into Indonesia. We'd like to see it. It will create jobs. It will bring in high technology. It will bring in high-value goods, but only if we can produce them in country using components that have to be imported. And there we come up against import restrictions, which have been an impediment in recent years, and we come up against TKDN, or the rigidity of local content regulations. So ideally, if we were lobbying government now for FDI and for those incentives, we'll be certainly focusing on local content, and perhaps not looking for its outright withdrawal, but certainly a relaxation. One very optimistic element I see in the coming term is the growth and development of the 24 special economic zones that Indonesia now has. These give us the opportunity to allow these kinds of industries and corporations to produce high-value goods in those SEZs, perhaps to allow the SEZs a degree of flexibility on policy and regulations, to relax TKDN in those zones, to allow them certain imports that aren't available in other parts of the country, but to grow strategically the industries that we wish to see succeeding here for those high-value productions. So those are the kinds of companies we wish to see here. So I'd very much like to see the SEZs growing, developing around Batam, around all the industrial parks that we have, focusing on health, for example. We now have one in Bali, in Sanur, focused on health. We have the omnibus law on health, which was passed squarely to allow investment in health. What it means for us is the return of the diaspora of Indonesian doctors and nurses who've been practicing abroad, bring them back to work in hospitals and clinics in those health-focused SEZs. Bring in the hospitals that will cater to that middle class and grow that human capital that we need and help to improve the overall health of the producing classes and the working classes and the middle class. Allow those SEZs to produce high-value goods focused on specific industries that will allow Indonesia to succeed in a way that Thailand has with semiconductor chips and computer drives, that Malaysia is starting to do with chips, that we're starting to see in Chonburi in central Thailand with the growth of the EV automotive industry, which is now already underway. Indonesia has these factories too. Many of them are Chinese. We're waiting for other investments to come in. And I think we can draw them in if we have the right and attractive investment incentives for them to do so. And that climate has to be built. At the moment, it's not there.
Severely lacking. Although in the past administration, we've seen a lot of red tape actually been cut, but it's still not enough.
Still not enough?
Yeah.
It's not enough.
What are the difficulties that Indonesia are facing? What are the key things that we need to...
Why
Let's
has it been
focus
so
briefly
stagnant?
on the positives. So under President Jokowi, we did see moves towards greater streamlining of investment entry through BKPM. The streamlining of licenses, for example.
Right.
With some industries, we need tens of licenses, in some more than 100 licenses in order to commence an industry. That's now been condensed into much more, I won't say one-stop shops, but certainly a much more streamlined process. But it's not enough to draw in the FDI that we need.
Especially when you consider the competition.
Absolutely,
in the region.
and the competition is there and succeeding. And also we see in other ASEAN countries a greater consolidation of policy from centre to provinces and regions. Here, many investors report that if a regulation is implemented at the national level, they make an assumption that it's going to be also implemented at the regional and local level. But on the ground, it can be different. And that's a struggle. So, when they're looking to benefit from national regulations, actual implementation on the ground can be different. And that's a struggle.
So although it's been decided in Jakarta, and then when you go to, let's say, Papua, probably it's a completely different ballgame there for
maybe we don't need to go as far as Papua for that, Now, Indonesia is industrializing, and we've seen great progress now in Central Java, in East Java, in Sumatra, in the more conservative growth of industry. Those are now much more well established. Infrastructure, supply chain, logistics has improved immensely. But we've also seen more positively in the second tenure of President Jokowi, the growth of industry in Sulawesi, in Kalimantan. And these are industrial parks which are dedicated to green industries with green energy. To attract many of the modern high-tech industries, we need to service that production with green energy. Otherwise, the importing nations of today, Western countries, for example, won't be able to import them because those products need to be produced using green energy. So Sulawesi and Kalimantan are immensely important because these new, fresh, green industrial parks and zones are primed for renewable energy. So bringing them in with renewable energy now will allow those high-value products to be produced in country for export to countries that require renewable energy production. And that's an enormous benefit in Indonesia, but only if it lives up to them, doesn't revert to coal. And the concern is that the phase out of coal is going to be slower than was anticipated.
I think we're very much still dependent on coal.
Absolutely, we are. And we've seen recent statements by some ministers indicating that the use of coal may even increase before
when
it decreases.
Prabowo mentioned coal also in his speech,
one of
giving a nod to
source of energy in the middle of his clean energy speech, nonetheless. I would love to continue the conversation on clean energy, but before that, I want to get your take, Budina, about the slow progress on reformation, especially in bureaucracy and regulatory reform. Is it because our vast size? I mean, we heard that it's so much harder to steer a big ship. So is our big size actually holding us back in this matter? Because we see all these other countries next to us being so more agile and flexible with their reform. What do you think is our biggest problem?
Okay, so well, that's a long paper to write. But if you let's put it this way. This question has been, we've been trying to answer this in various different phases of our history. First, we thought being a centralized nation will be the answer for that. That the governor giving order to the district level, and then the district just implement, that will be done. But the problem is, it's too far from the center to the regions, and the highlight there is not just the size, but the cost. Our fiscal capacity is very limited. Number two is that our capacity of the bureaucrats is also still very limited. So why? Because why I say this, because many times if you imagine a centralized policy, you would imagine a very strong think tanks within the government who not only map and identify what needs to be done, what are the source of problems, and then how we solve it in the most efficient way. That needs to be thought of. It's not political process. It's a meritocracy, technocratic process, you know, and that we didn't have. And you notice that only very few ministries in Indonesia have think tanks inside. And if you notice, this think tanks is also very under paid, under finance. And I went to China just about 1 month ago and visited their think tanks in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, for instance. Compare it to ours. In Indonesia Foreign Ministry, we have maybe just the staff size is only about 30 people.
Okay.
In China, 800.
800.
800 people.
My goodness.
And they map out every parts of the world and then plan out.
Yeah.
And they discuss and they speak the languages of every different regions.
Okay.
They speak Thais, they speak Chinese, they speak Germans, they speak, so they are very fluent. So you need strategy if you want to be as centralized as China.
Yeah. Strategy and an action plan.
An action plan that works with the strong financial capacity.
Okay.
Now, we don't have that. That's why we went into it's a very risky to democracy as well, right? If you're being too centralized, which is why under the reform era, we imagine in Indonesia that will give much more freedom to the local governments to create, to hear.
Just to cut you off a little
Speaking
bit.
about China,
Yeah, the envoy.
the VP, Vice President of China, Hansen,
It's now shaking hands. China, again, is Indonesia's biggest trading partner, still as if now.
And I think Prabowo has an admiration to how China cut down poverty.
Yeah.
How China is very well-planning country, right?
Yeah.
Which I said, we can be like China, but we need to not forget what China also have to make this happen. The machine,
their resources,
their
human resources and
yeah.
capabilities. Well, hopefully in his upcoming visit, the first overseas visit that he'll make, which is to China to see President Xi Jinping, he can, adopt a few approaches and strategies that will be applicable here in Indonesia.
The second visit in a year, because he was also there as minister.
Also there.
Yeah.
Okay, so I continue on?
Yes.
Yes, please.
Go on.
Okay, but with the decentralized approach, the challenge is that there's a variety of diverse situation underground. Okay. Not every district have the fiscal capacity, let alone the human resource capacity. Okay. So once again, you face that problem. Okay, what don't we have in the capital city? We don't also have at the local area. So that's the struggle. So I would imagine that Prabowo needs to start being realistic and imagine that Indonesia cannot be shifted back to being a centralized country. Yeah. Even as big as it is, the cabinet size, it will never solve the problem. He needs to think by sector, and the sector needs to be woven with the sector that's very strategic as well. So you cannot.
So coordination
between the sectors will be easier.
Also need to be increased. Yeah.
One of the things that Pa Ian mentioned about regulatory problem is that each ministry will have to will have different interpretation of the instructions from the president. That's the problem. And so businessmen will have to face, okay, I need to go to this minister and then that minister and then another minister and still not solve the problem. So I think he needs to streamline the cabinet instead of expanding it.
So is the size of the cabinets is the cost of doing politics?
Yes. Well, Indonesia is too big also to imagine having just one or two parties. We will never be like the US or like China or even like German, for instance. We are much more diverse. The streams of interest across Indonesia varies. And I think our job is to create the formula that works with it, not to suppress it, but instead work with it. Because Indonesians are very productive in nature, very creative as well. But if you create a regulation that cap that, then that's where people got frustrated and then start, you know, backing off and okay, then do the work, do the government work. I'm just watching and see if next year I can vote for another candidate. So being apathic is, it's not good.
All right. Now let's continue our conversation on clean energy that was postponed a little bit. Now we here in his speech, Prabowo Subianto made a mention of another big plan of him, which is quite ambitious, is to be self-sufficient in energy. And clean energy transition, he said, was the way to do that. Now, is it feasible to achieve that in the near future? And of course, we realize that a lot of foreign investment is needed to achieve the development of infrastructure and everything that is needed to have clean energy transition. So maybe my question to you, Ian, how attractive are we, Indonesia, in the eyes of foreign investors when it comes to clean energy transition related investments?
We're attractive for that here in Indonesia. If you look at the prospects for solar energy, geothermal in particular, we're clearly attractive. In fact, some of the major multinational oil and gas companies who have been less active in Indonesia in recent years are now back in Indonesia or planning to be back in with renewable projects in geothermal, solar, hydro, etc. So we are attractive. If you ask about feasibility, then this is difficult. You know, Indonesia has set targets for the percentage of renewable energy that's present in the electricity usage on the grid every year. We haven't met those targets by quite a significant percentage. By 2025, I believe we were expecting to be over 20% of renewable energy in the energy mix available in the grid. We're below 20% by quite a significant measure. Those targets have in fact been set back to accommodate that fall off. So we're already fighting from a rear guard in order to grow that clean energy. But you know, it is increasing, though incrementally. And again, in order to increase, for example, the growth of solar energy in country, again, it's a question of regulatory reform. That's again been a focus of local content, for example. The greatest producer of solar panels in the world is China, as China is for many products. Indonesia needs to import those for the growth of its solar energy. It can't, you know, we cannot base a solar energy industry here, certainly not one that's going to grow at sufficient pace to meet those renewable energy targets unless we relax local content regulations and allow the import of those products. Now that discussion has already been had, and there is some flexibility there, but we need to see a deeper flexibility and a more long-term flexibility, and one with fewer conditions on the companies that are bringing those panels in. Once we've achieved a critical mass of a certain percentage, then Indonesia will be able to move forward independently and perhaps even produce those solar panels. But we have to construct that industry first, and that takes time and a period of years. But certainly with solar energy, the future is positive. Geothermal, possibly even more positive. Indonesia, as we know, lies on the ring of fire. We have a great deal of access to the hot rocks technology that geothermal energy offers, and a number of these are already in place. We are seeing investment drawn in from Singapore, from Japan, from other countries. So this is promising. So this must succeed, because Indonesia has committed to phasing out coal over the next several decades and to net zero by 2060. That's later than many countries are actually committing themselves to, but it's something to aim at. But in order to achieve that, we need to be starting right now and to be accelerating the pace at which renewable energy is constructed and brought into the electricity grid. And that means the President and the Cabinet requiring PLN to work with renewable energy providers in the private sector in a flexible way that would allow them to produce renewable energy, perhaps within those industrial estates, within those special economic zones, direct to industry with less of the bureaucratic red tape which companies report they are experiencing in the drawdown of energy that's produced by renewable energy sources. So the future is promising, but we have those challenges to overcome, and they're significant.
Okay, this fruitful conversation on renewable energy has made me realize I need my own source of renewable energy, which is a glass of water.
Okay, let's take a quick break then, Siska Becker. We'll be right back after these messages. Stay close. Welcome back to our special report. Tonight's gala dinner from the Merdeka Palace. Still with me, Uli Herdi, and my partner, Siska Becker. Now let's move on to our next report. So, newly inaugurated President Prabowo Subianto on Sunday emphasized Indonesia's readiness to continue sending humanitarian aid to Gaza, Palestine.
He said in his inaugural speech at Nusantara Building, Jakarta on Sunday, Indonesia is ready to send more humanitarian aid to Palestine and that ready to evacuate injured victims, including children, traumatized and victims of war. Indonesian government is also ready to prepare hospitals for victims of war, Prabowo added. According to Prabowo, during President Joko Widodo's term, Indonesia sent multiple humanitarian aid shipments to Palestine. Currently, Indonesia has also placed volunteers in Gaza and Rafah. He then mentioned Indonesian doctors and nurses who have joined the mission with the United Arab Emirates to help treat victims of war. He reiterated the government's support for the Palestinian people who are still facing war. On the same occasion, chairperson of MPR, Ahmad Muzani, said he hoped Prabowo will continue to fight for the independence of Palestinian people. The Palestinian conflict is a complex issue that must be addressed, he added. The Indonesian government tripled its funding assistance to the United Nations Relief and Works Agency for Palestine Refugees, or UNRWA, in 2023. This year, it doubled its contribution to $1.2 million, according to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. In addition, the Indonesian government is continuing to push innovative funding to strengthen UNRWA, including by exploring cooperation with the National Arms Agency, or Basnas, to increase aid distribution to UNRWA. Since November 2023, Basnas has distributed around $3.3 million to the Palestinian people.
President Prabowo Subianto is officially inaugurated as the President of the Republic of Indonesia today on October 20th, 2024 for the next 5 years after winning more than 58% of the total votes in the presidential election early this year. Now let's take a look on a brief profile of President Prabowo Subianto.
Days in the lead to the official inauguration today, Prabowo Subianto, who turned 73 this week, was seen meeting various political figures at his Kertanegara private residence in South Jakarta. The meeting is seen as part of the vetting process to seek cabinet ministers in his new government. Prabowo wants to steer Indonesia in the next 5 years. President Prabowo's concern over the global political situation has prompted him to ask his candidate ministers to gather at his Hambalang near Bogor and learn from various international experts on Wednesday and Thursday this week. President Prabowo, who was born in Jakarta, comes from an elite family background in Indonesia. His father, Sumitro Joyo Hadikusumo, once served as minister under President Sukarno and Suharto. His grandfather founded one of the country's state-owned bank, Bank Negara Indonesia, in 1946. President Prabowo's childhood has been marked by international exposure, living in overseas countries like Singapore, Hong Kong, Switzerland, the United States, and the UK. Such exposure has made him a multilingualist, speaking fluent English, German, French, and Dutch, for example. Upon returning to Indonesia, Prabowo joined the Army Special Forces Unit, Kopassus. Prabowo married Siti Hediati Haryadi, the second daughter of former President Suharto, in 1983. However, their marriage ended in 1998 when President Suharto stepped down amid nationwide protests. They were blessed with a son, Ragowo Didit Hedi Prasetyo, or better known as Mas Didit. Didit has been seen accompanying Prabowo in various political activities in Indonesia early this year, from registering to the General Election Commission or KPU last year to public campaign and various other political activities that has helped Prabowo Subianto win the presidential election this year. Didit is an Indonesian fashion designer. Given such international exposures, observers and analysts said that President Prabowo would take a more proactive foreign policy. This is particularly true as President-elect Prabowo has taken the initiative to take European tour, visiting some European countries like France, Russia, Serbia, and Turkey. Apart from this, President-elect Prabowo made official visit to ASEAN member countries in August and September. Setting a footprint in the international forum, President-elect Prabowo Subianto wants to take Indonesia into the global stage.
Vice President-elect Gibran Rakabuming Raka is now Vice President starting from October 20, 2024. Now, Prabowo Subianto and Gibran won the 2024 presidential election in a landslide victory early this year, garnering a total votes of more than 58%. Let's take a look on Gibran's brief profile.
Gibran Rakabuming Raka is the eldest son of Joko Widodo, the 7th President of the Republic of Indonesia and Iriana. Gibran was born in Surakarta, Central Java on October 1, 1987. After completed his early education in Solo, Gibran then continued his studies overseas. He studied in Orchid Park Secondary School and Management Development Institute of Singapore, or MDIS, with certificate from University of Bradford, UK, as partner of MDIS. Gibran enrolled in InSearch program at the University of Technology Sydney, or UTS. However, InSearch program is a pathway to UTS that prepares students for admission to the university. For Gibran, he did not continue his study there. Before following his father's footsteps in politics, Gibran was once known as an entrepreneur in Solo City. After graduating at the age of 23, Gibran started his entrepreneurial career instead of continuing his father's furniture business. Then he delved into culinary business and built Chili Pari, a catering business. He also owns Markobar, a food stall selling premium sweet martabak or stuffed pancake. In 2015, Gibran married Selvi Ananda, and they are now blessed with 2 children, Yan Etes Srina Rendra and La Lembah Mana. Gibran became spotlight when he joined the 2024 presidential election as the running mate of presidential candidate Prabowo Subianto. His huge desire and probably pressure to join politics came as a stark contrast what Gibran once told public in 2018 that he did not want to enter politics. That is not the case apparently. Gibran's political career began in 2020 when he participated in the 2020 regional election in Solo. Gibran and his running mate Teguh Prakosa are candidates from the Indonesian Democratic Party of Struggle or PDIP. Gibran then was elected as mayor of Solo or Surakarta for 2021 to 2026 period. Gibran is the youngest mayor in the history of Solo City at the age of 33. His father, Joko Widodo, was previous a Solo City mayor from 2005 to 2012. Gibran stepped down as mayor of Solo in July 2024. Gibran's nomination into vice presidency has sparked controversy among public. The Constitutional Court has cleared the way for President Joko Widodo's 36-year-old son Gibran to become the running mate to frontrunner Prabowo Subianto. In an unexpected turn, the Constitutional Court allowed Gibran's bid to be vice president, removing a minimum age requirement of 40 for presidential or vice presidential candidates on the condition they have been elected to regional posts. This ruling caused the court's Chief Judge Anwar Usman, who is the president's brother-in-law and Gibran's uncle, was removed from his post as Chief Justice. After all this ongoing controversy, Gibran is now ready to be inaugurated as Vice President on October 20th, 2024.
So there you have it, the profiles of Prabowo Subianto and Gibran Rakabuming Raka, now the president and vice president of Indonesia.
Quite a different background.
Yes, indeed. And today we can say it's the culmination of their political journey.
Yeah.
It's now take the highest office in the country. So let's return to our conversation with our esteemed guests. Since we just saw the profiles of our new leaders, we would love to get your take on the significance of having these 2 contrasting individuals as the new leaders of Indonesia. Maybe we can start with Prabowo Subianto, Budina. As we know, domestically, Pak Prabowo has successfully transformed himself numerous times throughout his career. He was a military man, and then a retired general, and then a leader of a political party, ran for office 3 times, finally succeeding in winning the office after successfully rebranding himself as this Gemoy grandfather figure. But in terms of international relations, according to your insights, how is he seen right now by the international audience, the international media? How do they portray him?
Okay. At this point, I think the hope is very high that this is another chapter for Indonesia. So do not look back into what other countries have talked about, his records on this and that, because he's a military, you know, that's part of the story of the past. I think everybody expect, because he is elected with a landslide, and that
96 million people.
96 million people, you know, and the process was, you know, out there, open. So it's everybody's expect that he somehow can deliver. Creating an Indonesia in a new phase, in a difficult, you know, phase of the international relations as well. He can walk everybody through it. His interesting background is that he has very internationalized background.
Yeah.
Childhood.
Childhood.
Many
you
years
know.
abroad.
Many years abroad.
Speaking multi-languages.
Multi-languages, and the parents are very well knowledgeable about Indonesian politics, businesses, and also definitely about politics in general, practical politics. So feel like the biodata reading should inform us, don't be surprised if he can do this and that, because he is well equipped for that.
Yeah.
How about the Vice President, Gibran Rakabuming Raka?
Yeah.
Well, Gibran.
Yeah, I think that's the sentiment of the whole country right now. Even we are still assessing.
We are still assessing
his capabilities and competence.
There's not much track record, right, about what he was and what he will be. It's still very much a guess. All we know mostly is that he came from Solo, successful in Solo during the presidency of his father as the president of Indonesia, the 7th president. So if we imagine there's no more interruptions, no more meddling of President Joko Widodo, will he get through, or what will he create?
Okay.
You know, I truly want to see who he really is as a leader.
Yeah, it's time to prove himself now, I guess. Would you say that probably we saw how comfortable Pak Prabowo Subianto is on the global stage? I think this is his time now to prove himself as a global leader. Would this mean that Gibran would probably take a more domestic role, probably in the field of, let's say, entrepreneurship or SMEs? What would you say his role would be in the next
This is another speculation, right?
Yeah.
Because we don't know. That was not apparent in the speech whatsoever, right? I wonder myself, what kind of duty will be assigned to him. Because if you look at the big names for domestic affairs, let's say for the Internal Affairs Ministry, Tito Karnavian, for instance, that's at least the name is out there. And then industry, Ministry of Industry, Ministry of Economics, those are big names, much, much older than him, and top political leaders, political party leaders. It's like not at the same level with Gibran. So
the big calibers.
Not the big calibers. So I would imagine Prabowo would deal with them as well. But there are more newer ministries, newer cabinet ministry, like the Ministry of...
Although there are some names in the vice minister's candidate that are probably kind of like his colleagues.
Yeah, his peers.
His peers. But vice minister's role is to help the minister.
Right.
You know, as a vice president, you don't deal with being vice.
Right.
So I would imagine he probably get assigned for the much newer ministries, like the Ministry of Culture and History, Ministry of maybe, I don't know, maybe the issue of free food will be, he will come to be the face of Prabowo there also, if visiting the areas maybe.
Yeah, I think that's the guessing game right now, to see what
to be honest, we're waiting.
Right. Let's hear what Pak Ian has to say about.
Yes. So, Pak Ian, what do you think?
It is a guessing game, but we have got something to go by. Let's go back to the campaign prior to the actual election and look at what the messaging was between the two there. There it was very much, certainly for Gibran, that the health, nutrition, expecting mothers, stunting. This was very much a feature of the presidential debates as well.
Right.
Gibran had a share in that narrative, and certainly in the campaign stops, in the televised portions of those, he was given that part of the agenda. So we may well see that he will have some responsibility for the nutritional angle, some of that human capital development, for example. He also talked a lot about, and President Prabowo also gave him the space for it, the digital transformation. So startups. During the campaign, Gibran talked about financing tech startups, for example. There would be a fund for this.
Yeah, there was a big
there would
talking
be support for that. So I think perhaps he'll be given that portfolio too. The talk around the selection of Gibran at the time was very much one of benefiting from and exploiting the demographic dividend that Indonesia offers, with such a high proportion of people under 50, under 40, under 30, tens of percent, more than 52%, I think, under 40 in the population. So I think he'll be given a degree of those portfolios that reflect that agenda.
Demographic.
Now, at the time when President Prabowo first started talking about the free lunch program, it wasn't given a great deal of credence or respect, I recall. People thought, oh, it's just a campaign gimmick. But now it's gathered a lot more substance and credibility. There will now be a new national agency of nutrition constructed around it. There'll be a whole new staff for that. Industry and the private sector are being mobilized towards it. So,
are there precedent about this in another country?
There is, in fact, and President Prabowo, while he was still minister and during the campaign, was looking at the precedent from India, for example, where similar, in fact, he was looking at the different foodstuffs they use. When he was exploring whether this would be milk-based or not, we know that there are significant impediments to giving millions of free milk-based meals every day in Indonesia, particularly if it's twice a day, because we don't have a great deal of, we require a great deal of additional import, for example, and the establishment of a cattle industry, which Indonesia doesn't have experience in and doesn't have the numbers for. That would take a significant period of time to establish. But yeah, there is a precedent, and he's been studying that. But perhaps that part of the agenda has grown too big now, and the president will handle that himself. Perhaps some element of the nutritional portfolio, anti-stunting, digital, startup. And let's not forget that Prabowo himself is a multi-millionaire, an extremely successful businessman in his own right. When he left Indonesia after 1998, he established a series of extremely successful businesses that accorded him that status as a multi-millionaire before he returned to the country and established Gerindra, now the third largest political party in the country, a remarkable achievement in such a short period. And so he has the track record for investment. He has the track record for smart business credibility and for attracting investment to himself. So we expect that in his speech, when he talks about being pro-business, as he has done earlier this year at the Mandiri Investment Forum, 2 weeks ago at the BNI Investment Forum, he expressed very much a pro-business angle and a pro-business government culture, one that will support and aim to draw foreign direct investment. He's talking about industries that will attract investment, high-tech industries, industries that require climate change support in the country. All of this, the digital industries, the health industries, which are new, and a new carve-out for health industries in a way that was never present before since the establishment of the omnibus health law. These are new industries that I'm sure will attract investment, and he's making the right kinds of messages to the foreign direct investment community. So I think that will succeed, but yet to see what he will give Gibran for those responsibility areas.
Okay, interesting and sharp assessment. Now, before we proceed, we're going to take another short break, but stay right here on our special program. We'll be right back.
Welcome back to our special report, Gala dinner from the Merdeka Palace with your anchor for this evening, Uli Herdi, and my partner here, Siska Becker. And now we're going to take you back to the TV pool to see what's going on now at the Merdeka Palace.
Let's have a look.
We have to improve all services and all execution of the ideals of democracy. So, once again, please accept on the behalf of the Indonesian people and on my own behalf, once again, the greatest appreciation, the greatest thanks, and my highest assurance that we hold the relationship between Indonesia and all the countries represented here in highest degree of regard. We would like to continue this relationship and this friendship. Indonesia would like to be the best of neighbors, the best of partners, to work together for the common good, common peace, common prosperity. Thank you very much. And I'm new at this, so.
Ladies and gentlemen, please kindly rise. Next, we would like to invite the President of the Republic of Indonesia to lead the toast.
Let us drink to world peace, to the common good of all our peoples. Peace, prosperity for all the peoples of the world. Please.
Please be seated.
This is my first official dinner, so I apologize if I'm a bit inexperienced. Foreign Minister, was I correct? Thank you.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, to celebrate this historical moment, allow us to present an Indonesian dance performance and song medley. At the beginning, we will present a dance called Tarian Baris Bali by Budaya Katulistiwa Dance Group. Balinese Baris dance is a traditional dance from Bali, Indonesia, performed by dancers forming lines. The Baris dance depicts the courage of Balinese knights who are fighting to defend their king in a war. Next on the agenda is a song medley by Praditya Wiratama Symphonic Orchestra from the Republic of Indonesia Defense University. The orchestra was formed on June 13, 2022 at the initiative of His Excellency Mr. Prabowo Subianto as the Minister of Defense at that time. It consists of student cadets from the Republic of Indonesia Defense University aiming to create beautiful harmonies and melodies through various musical instruments. Without further ado, enjoy your dinner and please give a warm applause for tonight's dance performance and song medley.
segala tantangan, mohon petunjuk yang kuasa.
Ciptakanlah kerukunan bangsa,
Kobarkanlah
dalam dada semangat jiwa Pancasila.
hidup tiada mungkin tanpa perjuangan, tanpa pengorbanan. Mulia adanya
Berpegangan tangan,
satu dalam cita
demi masa depan
Indonesia Jaya. Hidup tiada mungkin tanpa perjuangan, tanpa pengorbanan. Mulia adanya berpegangan tangan, satu dalam cita
demi masa depan
Indonesia
Jaya.
Indonesia Jaya.
Tanote more non you più ben satu te Portalo che per guardare intorno me c'era fai un mondo come sempre.
Engkau ku banggakan. Walaupun banyak negeri ku jalani, yang masyhur ramai di kata orang, tetapi kampung dan rumahku, di sanalah ku rasa senang. Tanahku tak ku lupakan. Engkau ku banggakan.
So continuing our conversation about the gala dinner, it has started a couple of minutes ago, about half an hour ago, and people are sitting down already and waiting for the dinner, and we just saw the performance from the Defense University, Siska Becca.
Yes, that felt quite nostalgic. I may use that word. It's been a while, I think, since we've seen quite a strong militaristic presence.
That's true. So that reminds us to Prabowo Subianto's background,
Yes,
and
indeed.
Beck's question about his approach in steering the country.
Exactly.
Whether it will have a militaristic
Yeah.
approach as well.
Now, we've mentioned this before in our discussion, Budina, whether his past as a strongman, as a military man, will be perceived as, a problem by the international audience. But do you think, with what we've seen so far, with how he presented himself at the inauguration, and now with the first official state dinner of Prabowo Subianto as president, do you think this strong militaristic approach will be his style of leadership?
I think it's his identity. I don't think that's something that we can change, or he even willing to, differ. And I think with that, he doesn't want to show militaristic. Probably in his mind, it's being nationalistic, being proud of who Indonesia is. The choice of songs, other than the one that I don't quite understand, that was an Italian song or something. The other songs show that pride to Indonesia, about the second song, for instance, showing that regardless of how many countries I visited, I come back. It's so him, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's about him, never forgetting about his country, even as he has lots and lots of experience elsewhere.
Okay. I think we have a footage of Prabowo Subianto's speech at the beginning of the state dinner. Let's have a look now so we can later dissect it.
To leave your important political and government duties to spend some time with us is indeed very touching and very moving for us. We are only recently experiencing constitutional democracy. We still have to learn a lot. We realize that we have to improve all services and all execution of the ideals of democracy. So, once again, please accept on the behalf of the Indonesian people and on my own behalf, once again, the greatest appreciation, the greatest thanks, and my highest assurance that we hold the relationship between Indonesia and all the countries represented here in highest degree of regard. We would like to continue this relationship and this friendship. Indonesia would like to be the best of neighbors, the best of partners, to work together for the common good, common peace, common prosperity. Thank you very much. And I'm new at this, so.
Ladies and gentlemen, please kindly rise. Next, we would like to invite the President of the Republic of Indonesia to lead the toast.
Let us drink to world peace, to the common good of all our peoples. Peace, prosperity.
So that was from earlier, and Pak Prabowo mentioned about being the best of neighbors, and maybe that's related to foreign policy as well.
Yes, indeed. Now, maybe we can get some comments from Ian on everything we've seen so far in this first official state dinner by Prabowo Subianto. You mentioned earlier how Prabowo Subianto has reiterated many times that as a leader of Indonesia, he'll be very friendly to investors, open for business. But on the other hand, we've also seen some side of him that's very nationalistic, very protective of Indonesia's interests. Do you think this sort of conflicting sides of him will make the foreign investors a bit worried and cautious?
I think there's been sufficient positivism in his messaging in recent events, speeches that he's made to reassure the investment community that he will be open to investment. There's a great deal of interest in Indonesia. Foreign nations around the world have been looking forward to this transition and this change. They knew it was going to happen. They knew this cycle, this 2 times 5 years has been bedded in Indonesia for several decades now. So there's a great deal of anticipation around the policy platform, and it's been received warmly, I would say, in the circles in which I mix and circulate. Okay. So there's positivity over the pro-business approach that he's expected to inculcate in his term. We talked about the military earlier and his military culture, his military life and career that he's led. He's certainly brought defense front and center during the second term of President Joko Widodo, where he served as minister and embarked on a wide round of large and expensive weapons and defense procurement projects for Indonesia. There was some speculation as to what was the foundation for that, you know, against whom did Indonesia need to protect itself. But certainly he's built up an orbit of customer relationships now, extending from China to the West, to France, to the Middle East, for defense and weaponry procurement. So he's certainly stating a case for Indonesia as a nation that will protect its interests as a nation state. At the same time, he's gone out of his way to reassure the international community of his commitment to peace. You saw the toast just now, and all of his messaging is very peaceful. He's also about to make his first state visit to China. He made one as a minister of Defense. So we know he's committed to external relations and will lead the presidency in a diplomatic fashion. And I think he will have investment on his side. Now, the protectionism and nationalism is a concern because it's connected to the regulatory environment and policy. And again, it brings us back to the kinds of policies that aren't as welcome to an open and transparent investment climate, such as local content, import restrictions, etc., the focus on the internal, the focus on the domestic. So he has a fine line to walk to achieve that definition between what will draw in that investment, what will reinsure that investment community, and what will put them off. And that's why I reiterate the need among the cabinet, and I'm hoping that these days of deliberation with the new cabinet will help to expand the thought of those new ministers as to how they can bring investment into their own ministerial portfolios. Yet to see how that'll pan out, but the regulatory environment has got to be front and foremost.
Still, the major concern
regulatory
is right there.
Maybe I'd like to add a little bit because in the next few months, this is still the euphoria period.
The honeymoon period.
The honeymoon period. Everybody still expects the best out of him, and I think he's still in the mood of pleasing a lot of people. But you touch upon the militaristic style, which I think is an important note. If we noticed this morning as well in the Parliament building, going into the Parliament building, the number of guards, is very much more present and more obvious than ever before during celebrations like this. And then the involvement of Defense University, for instance, to sing instead of just usually in the past 10 years we usually invite professional actors and singers. This time it's the military people.
That was an interesting choice.
It's an interesting choice,
which reflects his background.
But at the same time, he sent a message about democracy, right? So again, I don't know yet how it will turns out in the next few months after this honeymoon period ends, because the how question is really how the world is going to decide whether or not they continue working closely with Indonesia or shifting. It's a very, very fine line indeed.
There's one more indicator we should be looking at, and that is, over the last couple of years, we've seen Parliament looking to discuss and promulgate a law that would allow more military officers to serve in civil posts and civil roles. Now, the degree to which that's taken up by Parliament and President Prabowo will give us an indication of what kind of culture we will see in the democracy that he's talking about. So we have this 100 days to look forward to, during which we'll see a great deal of positive movement along all of these lines, I think we can be sure. But let's see what happens during those 100 days, whether by the end of them we've seen that come to fruition, or will it be laid to rest, or will we see that coming more to the fore?
Okay. Now let's go back to the first day on his agenda. Before he started the gala dinner, he met with a lot of state leaders who was in attendance for this gala dinner, including the Deputy Prime Minister of Australia and also of New Zealand. Now we mentioned about how he wants to be a good neighbor to all the countries around Indonesia. Australia, of course, is one of the most strategic partners in also neighboring countries to Indonesia. How do you see the relationship between Indonesia and Australia panning out in Prabowo's administration, Budina?
I think Prabowo, as a military man, has been trying to engage Richard Marles, the Minister of Defense, for a long time. It's been a long time. And in between March and this inauguration, he met with him. And somehow the news said that the two countries, Indonesia and Australia, is about to develop some kind of defense pact. And there was a question to me from media asking how true will this be? And I checked to various sources. turns out it's not really the case.
Oh, okay.
So is there a misperception between Australia and Indonesia on this? I wonder. And then in the speech this morning, Prabowo clearly said, we are non-bloc. Indonesia is non-bloc and never going to have any pact, defense pact with other countries. So, you know, why there's such misperception in the first place, right? So indeed, the approach of Australia is not alone anymore since AUKUS is there.
Yeah.
It's not just about bilateral relations Indonesia and Australia, it's also about the Indo-Pacific arena and also about South China Sea, about how Indonesia treats China and also treats China in various different complex ways. So Prabowo needs to realize that the degree of complexity when they he negotiates or send the Minister of Defense or Minister of Foreign Affairs to Australia will be different.
Okay. What do you think, Ian, when it comes to Indonesia-Australia trade relations?
I think we'll see an enhancement. The Australian government has announced within the course of this year a new big deal team, a new deal team that's coming in with enhanced commercial opportunities for investment, seeking investment opportunities in Indonesia for Australian companies, but also seeking to identify talent within Indonesian industries and communities for Australia. For example, in the digital sphere, the Australian Embassy maintains an office for the digital industries, and they've been focused on identifying Indonesian talent for it. It's been Indonesians who are going to Australia and are actually implementing projects there in the digital sphere and succeeding in it. So the exchange of talent, of technology, of industry is already happening. And I'm sure with the current focus of the embassy and its commercial section, Austrade, on this, that will continue. It's certainly the aim of the embassy and Austrade at this time. I think we will also see more Australian educational links and connections to Indonesia. Education and human capital development will be a key plank in Prabowo's administration. He's already said that. Australia already has the Monash University here. It's established. They are offering degrees which are Monash degrees in Indonesia. It's in BSD, just outside Jakarta. It's here. It's established. It's well renowned. So I think that's just one stepping stone on the way. So I see a lot of positivity and enhancement for that relationship. And I'm hoping it would be the same for New Zealand, but I've yet to see further evidence of that.
All right.
So apart from the regulatory issues, what are the factors that makes Indonesia less attractive compared to its neighbors in Southeast Asia?
From my perspective, again, I would say it's the investment climate, the regulatory environment, regulatory certainty, for example, providing a package of incentives, whether it's in terms of tax, placement within industrial parks, relaxation of strict policies, for example, enhancing individual industries, providing incentives for labor, for example. All of that is making Vietnam certainly the go-to country for, as we've seen in the last couple of years, investment that's been moving out of China, for example. There's been this policy of China plus one, often Vietnam is the plus one. If it's China plus two, Indonesia or Thailand may be the plus two. But more often than not, it's been Thailand. So it's going to have to be the effort of Indonesia now to construct a regulatory environment that will put in place the right incentives, the right policies that will attract that investment into Indonesia. Indonesia has all the potential for it, and all the beginnings are there. We've talked about the special economic zones. We've talked about the mature industrial parks, which are improving in terms of their supply chain sophistication. Logistics now in Indonesia. When we talked about the size and scale of the country earlier, we should have talked about connectivity across the country. Enormously expensive and very difficult to do across an archipelago. But Indonesia is now doing that with internet connectivity across the entire country. All all provinces and islands will be connected and transport links through, whether through air, through ship, through internet, are being constructed. This will allow a much more uniform policy platform to be rolled out across the entire country. I'm hoping that this government, this administration will retain the decentralization that we currently enjoy, which I think has been a major success of the reform period for the last more than 20 years. I'm sure that there will be some who are concerned about the prospect for re-centralization, but I certainly think that decentralization offers the promise of effective business entry and FDI support provincially. But I think we've just got to get that regulatory framework right. And I still believe that the new ministers will have a lot of work to do in the strategy and tactics that will facilitate that and allow that to happen. Again, it's back to import restrictions, providing the conditions for industry to thrive, for domestic production by Indonesians with Indonesian companies, just the same as it is for foreign companies here. And maybe they're working within the SEZs and the industrial parks for that, focusing on the industries that Indonesia wants to attract.
All right, fascinating insights. So let's now take a breather from this crash course of foreign investments and foreign policy, but don't go anywhere. Our special report on TV Around the World will return shortly.
Welcome back to a special program, Gala Dinner Live from the Merdeka Palace. Still with you, anchor for this evening, Uli Herdi, my Francisca Becker. And earlier during the break, we were just having a conversation about...
Yes.
About what, Siska Becker?
About the lack of quality when it comes to human resource in Indonesia, which
and
has
the correlation with the education as well.
Yes, maybe we should take that up with our viewers as well, because that's some fascinating insights.
Because I thought
that you've mentioned,
Ian earlier mentioned that investors are interested in conducive climate created by the government, ensured by the government. But then we're talking also about our competitors, countries like Vietnam, countries like Bangladesh, Sri Lanka. I say we have to be very careful in trying to draw a conclusion from this, because manufacturing sector is an important sector for countries that are trying to create jobs and numerous numbers of jobs. Now, the challenge of manufacturing sector is that they tend to race to the bottom. Companies will try to go to countries with the lowest standard of labor and wage.
Basically that.
Basically that. Labor. So cheap labor. Now, if that labor can work longer hours, that's even better, because factories would try to open 24 hours per day. So us as a country who already respect human rights, already have signed 8 core labor standards of the ILO, of course have to maintain our standard and not try to compete with those countries in that way. But instead, we need to really invest in our human capital. So there's a big mismatch of what we provide through our education system. Our graduates from vocation school and also from universities are not ready to work in those competitive area of manufacture. Because nowadays, I start seeing big companies run by Indonesian mogul is also hiring people from India, from Sri Lanka, even from sectors that are very much mentioned by President Prabowo, agriculture, forestry. They hire people from abroad because they understand more about planting, how to treat soils, how to identify how different soil will create better rootings for plants.
Even for the specific soil in Indonesia,
for specific
soils
don't have
the people that has the know-how.
Exactly. So this is the part of research and development skill that I think is still missing from our graduates. And we focus a lot on, I borrow Ian terms, borrow a lot on, we create laborers instead of skilled laborers. So that's what has been missing, and I hope Prabowo is aware of this. Yeah.
So those are the examples of the mismatch between the education system here in Indonesia to what the market really needs is that. So what are the current situation of the vocation in Indonesia? What are the kind of labor that we produce that we don't need actually?
We don't quite need a lot. A lot of vocation school focus on service sectors.
Service sectors such as?
So administrative and hotels, what do you call that? Hospitality industry. Areas that doesn't quite need a lot of labor, that cannot quite absorb lots of labor. So we focus on the wrong
industry, basically.
Wrong industry, basically.
And the cause of that policy is?
The cause of that policy, there's a gap between Ministry of Labor, Ministry of Industry, and then the national level with the regional levels.
Okay.
Because the vocation schools are provided both by the central government as well as by local governments. Now there's that mismatch over there. The curriculum, there's a long story if I can tell you all this.
This is another thesis.
Another thesis because lots of details. But maybe just to make things simpler is to imagine like this, if you're talking about educating a bunch of youth who have no imagination of what sector will be creating most jobs, then it's the job of the government who knows the mapping of jobs out there available, the kinds of investors in coming to Indonesia. Then the government should info the youth, you get scholarship, you can go to this kind of curriculum because this is now the one that will be sought after, right? So we don't just pour out, this is education. So long as you're educated, you go to this school, then you get jobs.
Right.
It's a two different paradigm, right? Two different ways of looking at jobs. So we're still missing there.
Okay. That feels like such a missed opportunity because as we know, the education sector takes a big chunk of the state budget, including the last one. And a lot of efforts were made by the former Minister of Education to give equal access of good quality education to all Indonesians.
But still we see education is the problem. Access to education is improving, but quality education is limited.
And also the direction where this is going, the education is going as well, because if it's not, it's a mismatch then,
Like, let me give you an example of Singapore, a country who is attending this ceremony. Singapore has been for years focusing on its vision of creating a hub, right? Making its Singapore as the hub of financial industry and also for logistics. So they give scholarships and open schools specifically for that area. And when you talk about logistics taught in Singapore, it's very high-end logistics. So not only like people working in the cargo industry, but they know how to calculate between what point to what point in a global supply chain, very efficient, and they can operate lots of new machines connected to logistics for railways, for airports, so you can see they work instantaneously once they graduate. In Indonesia, you sort of like need another sets of training in order for you to start working. So that's the cost that needs to be handled by investors as well.
What about you, Ian? What's your take on the issue of education in Indonesia?
Let's just look at that comparison for a moment. So what do we learn from the example of Singapore? We learn that those students have foreign language, they have English language, they're sophisticated in the use of English language. They have the skills they need to do not just a job in Singapore, but a job that is related to a supply chain all around the world in terms of the assessment of the elements that you mentioned. But also there is a mapping of industry and education. So students are made work ready because there's consultation between industry and the educational bodies. That's what we need to see more of. And we have to see it here for two reasons. One, Indonesia has an enormous demographic dividend, you can call it. But that's also millions of jobs that had to be found between now and Indonesia's golden year of 2045. This is crunch point. We can't wait till 2045 to solve this problem. The problem has to be solved now in order that in 2045, those people are working and productive in their most productive years and supporting a society that will be gradually aging and which will impose a much greater financial burden on society than the one we're currently carrying. And that's going to be borne by the generation that's coming. So it's essential that industry and led by the ministry speaks with education and educational institutions, also as led by the ministry, and they design a strategy to make students and workers work ready for this modern age. What does that mean in terms of practical jobs? You asked, Siska, what kind of, or it may have been Uli, what kind of jobs we are creating that we don't need right now. Service, hotels, hospitality, maybe one element. But what kind of jobs can make creative and productive people out of those young workers and young students that we have now? Jobs in light industry, jobs that are tied to the digital industries, jobs where people are creating their own production through digital means and producing things that can be sold, jobs that create employment for other people in startups, whether it's in food and beverage or production of homeware goods, artistic and cultural goods. Indonesia has an entire ministry which has been devoted to the creative industries. There is enormous export potential for the arts and culture and digital products of Indonesia's creative talent, and that's what we need to exploit in order to promote these jobs. Jobs which aren't simply in factories or in production or in industrial estates, but which are carved out of the new industries in light industry, in the digital industries, in the health industries, in education, and in all of these. And it's essential that we start that process now.
And another thing is the demographic dividend we're talking about. I really hope President Prabowo will start to see that it's so naive to imagine creating jobs alone inside of Indonesia. We have to start thinking about exporting those demographic dividends abroad to other countries. But do not think about, I hope the youth here do not imagine working in some kind of already settled places, the nice places with fancy livelihood and stuff. But instead, step by step. Like for instance, if you are very good in a textile factory, then you apply to become a supervisor in India or in Sri Lanka or in Vietnam, because Indonesia used to have big companies like that, and we still have some sekolah tinggi, some institute teaching them about textile and stuff. So imagine yourself going there as a skilled workers. Don't be afraid, and I hope the government also create this facilitation, the bridge. So not just go to school, scholarship, but also find jobs abroad, because a lot of countries need our skills too.
We have a precedent for this already in the oil and gas industry. So Indonesian oil and gas engineers are sought after in many parts of the world because they are very good. So you'll see Pertamina staff and Pertamina engineers and staff from other companies, Indonesian engineers, going out to countries in Africa, to the Middle East, other parts of the world, because they are experts in their field. And they've been working in Indonesia's very mature oil and gas fields for years. So there's the precedent. And we need to make that diaspora of talent want to come back to Indonesia and re-contribute when they return. We're sowing the seeds of our own future when we send that talent abroad and attract it back again, so they can transfer their knowledge and experience.
So that precedent can be replicated in other industries.
Absolutely, and should be. And we need to identify where we have our talent and our advantage, and where we don't, we need to build it.
Okay, like in health industry,
in health,
digital transformation.
Absolutely, yes. In automation, we need to be attracting the investment to build automation and plants in Indonesia. We need not be fearful of losing jobs to automation. We have to start creating new jobs in all of these new fields if we are going to achieve that digital transformation that the president has been talking about and is building his entire platform on.
Okay. Now there's
interesting.
one issue that I've been putting off to discuss until now, but I think it's the elephant in the room when it comes to progressing in Indonesia. And Pak Prabowo Subianto, in his speech earlier at the MPR building, also mentioned it, not in blatant words, but the word is corruption.
Oh, yeah.
Still a problem in Indonesia, and it has been hindering us to make significant progress. How do you see corruption as an issue now, and can we finally be rid of the culture of corruption and ready to enter a new era of Indonesia with clean governance, truly transparency, to achieve all those ambitious goals, be self-efficient in food and clean energy transition? All of that needs clean governance.
That's a very good question, because if you imagine corruption, do not just imagine something as simple as, look, there's the money, nobody can touch it, and then that's good. The reality on the ground is not as simple as that.
Not as straightforward as that.
Not as straightforward as that. The one that's still very much a structural problem in Indonesia is the feudalism, patrimonial culture as well, among the state bureaucrats and political parties.
Okay.
So if you do not imagine also all businesses will run equally across Indonesia. There are businesses that has strong, what do you call it, bonding or protection, getting special attention from state-owned enterprise or certain political parties. And because of that, they can have projects without tender, without you know, a proper bidding process. Fast track, you know. And then we've seen under the President Joko Widodo the challenge of creating priority programs, strategic national program, for instance. The implication of that is the bypassing of many processes where the public's eye cannot even detect, you know, where things are. Suddenly you get a winner, and then a company is opening somewhere, a land is getting cleared somewhere, and then the people just got, you know, puzzled, you know, and left behind. So that's the kind of corruption also we are facing. The implications of this is very much we have to think about good governance, changing the habit of how things are run in the political parties, also in the state bureaucracies. The law has been quite discriminative so far. It's not working towards the elite, but it's killing the one down below. So you've seen many regulations can be very tough for small businesses, but for the elite businesses, especially those linked to the political elites, can just run smoothly without much public eye. So I wonder whether Prabowo is going to strengthen KPK again, Anti-Corruption Watch, and also
is that your hope, Budina?
I really hope so, because you cannot do it. The executive, the president, cannot do it because it's not independent. You need an independent body, grant the strength to that body, so that not only the state can feel relieved of that burden, but the public can participate. The public has the stake and has the eye and ears. So you need to create whistleblower system that works, and then a punishment system that's really clear. So far, we still have a problem also in punishing. The penalty is not as is not as severe for people who corrupt. So things like that.
All right. What do you think, Ian? I mean, corruption is
Two
very
things.
costly for business.
It is.
Right?
It is extremely costly for business, and it's anti-business. So ethics are important for business as a value in themselves, but they're also important because compliance demands that they be so. And modern business must be compliant by law, whether it's in Indonesia, where there is a very harsh anti-corruption law, in fact, as well as overseas, where we have the Foreign Corruption Protection Act in the US, the UK Anti-Bribery Act, etc., and many other pieces of legislation around the world.
Yeah.
Foreign investors here are bound by one or more of those. They're certainly bound by their own home country legislation as well as Indonesia's when they're here. So they simply cannot engage in corruption. And yet, frankly speaking, many see it around them all the time in the form of incitements for bribery, demands for bribery, etc., etc., and other forms of corruption. Now, the KPK was a very strong body, and it had the prevention, the enforcement, the education programs. It had been doing extremely good work, and we know that it's been somewhat weakened in recent years. Now, President Prabowo, if he is consistent with his word, he repeated that word many times during his speech and in recent presentations, that he wishes to root out corruption. There is no place for it in his government. So I'm hoping that the agencies that you mentioned that might be more prone to it than others, whether they be political parties or BUMN or other corporations, will have heard that and will want to abide by that for fear of being on the wrong side of President Prabowo. But we've yet to see whether that will indeed be the case. We will wait to see who is the new leader of the KPK. We expect to see that news very soon. Be very interesting to see who that is and what kind of person will lead the KPK, what kind of leadership they will bring to it, and whether it will regain its status as the country's eradication body for corruption and lead that good governance platform.
You mentioned digital transformation. Do you think that can be a solution to eradicate corruption in Indonesia?
I really I think it can. And if we go back to the beginnings of successful digitalization in Indonesia, one of the recent crises that we saw was COVID-19, of course, and yet we were all dependent on the track and trace app. The app that we all use to access,
even to enter malls.
That's right.
To go anywhere.
all of that we did. And now that's been transformed into a much more overall health app that we would use in line with, you know, Peduli Lindungi as it was has now been transformed into Satu Sehat. And that was a remarkable piece of digital architecture. I was living in other countries at the time, so I saw COVID outside of Indonesia. And I would say that Peduli Lindungi was rather robust compared to others that I saw. So
it's actually quite applauded.
That's right.
By the global community.
It worked quite well. We've also seen a lot of taxation administration moved online, which has removed the human element and the possibility of you know, untoward negotiations and other things going on in tax that could otherwise occur, or demands, etc., that could be made on taxpayers. So that's been successful. BKPM has instigated digital processes in investment entry, for example. We're seeing a lot of education now being delivered digitally and services across the entire country. Some of the biggest mega unicorns in the world now that we see in the digital industries were born in Indonesia, whether they are ride-hailing apps or e-commerce, etc., etc. Indonesia has staked a place in the digital industries for some of these giant firms. Now, if we look under the cover, you might ask questions about their profitability, etc., etc., and there are definitely questions to ask there. But there's no doubt that the digital transformation has begun in Indonesia, and there are already significant successes. And I think President Prabowo is right when he says that the way forward is to rely for services and service delivery on digitalization. We've seen some success, and that can only continue. So, you know, I think the digital economy is growing year on year incrementally. Indonesia has one of the largest penetrations of internet use across Asia. The smartphone, the number of smartphones exceeds the number of the population here. So we know there's a great depth of internet use in Indonesia, and we're all dependent upon it. So I think we're midway through it.
So we had a lot of progress under President Joko Widodo's tenure as well, which brings us to this next news. Today, October 20, 2024, Indonesians are bidding farewell to Joko Widodo, who just finished his position as the country's president after leading the government for a decade. for the 2014 to 2019 and 2019 to 2024 periods.
Jokowi, an origin of Surakarta or Solo of Central Java, will return to his hometown after handing over the head of the state position to President-elect Prabowo Subianto, who took an oath as the 8th President of Indonesia earlier on October 20th, 2024. Over his 10-year tenure, Joko Widodo or Jokowi has issued many development policies, which have marked various achievements. Jokowi's presidency has been characterized by his focus on infrastructure development, social welfare programs, and economic growth. His term has overseen a period of remarkably stable growth of 5% each year, except in 2020, when the Indonesian economy contracted as a result of the global pandemic. Jokowi's development policies can be realized owing to his political strategy and branding of being modest, which won the hearts of people and his political opponents even before he became the president. Since his early years of becoming a mayor of Solo in 2005 and then governor of Jakarta in 2012, Jokowi had enjoyed a smooth political career with his political image of being populist was on the rise. He had also seen high approval ratings throughout his two-term presidency. Although a slight dip in the rating ahead of his retirement, Jokowi remained very popular among large parts of the public.
Allah, saya bersumpah.
During his first term as Indonesia's president in the 2014-2019 period, Jokowi intensively built infrastructure for connectivity, including toll roads, rapid transports, and airports. He also pushed for signature projects like the Jakarta-Bandung high-speed, toll roads, and other infrastructure projects to improve connectivity. Furthermore, dams and reservoirs were built to support the agricultural sector. Towards the end of his final term, Jokowi continued to intensify the downstream policy in all sectors to increase the added value of the nation's natural resources through downstreaming. Jokowi planned to make Indonesia able to process its raw materials into value-added products. For a long-term vision, Jokowi drafted a roadmap called Golden Indonesia 2045, which envisions Indonesia as an advanced economy when it celebrates the centenary of its independence.
Demografi 68,3.
Another big breakthrough from Jokowi is the relocation of the country's capital from Jakarta to Nusantara in East Kalimantan. Despite much work left to be done, the presidential palace in Nusantara is already functional within 2 years. Jokowi's vision for Nusantara extends far beyond his presidency. He planned the new capital city as a lasting monument to his leadership, a model of modernization for the global community, and a symbol of prosperity and greatness for the nation. Apart from the criticisms, the country's capital relocation aims to encourage equal Indonesia-centric development. In international affairs, Jokowi's policies have undeniably lifted the living standards of many millions of Indonesians and bolstered the nation's global influence. Notable achievement in Jokowi's second term was Indonesia's chairing of the G20 summit at a difficult time, and also when the country chaired ASEAN in 2023.
European defense, and he's absolutely right. It's a very, very good idea.
With all his work, Jokowi stands a great chance of leaving a mark when he steps down and return to his hometown in Solo. And what has been done and fought for by Jokowi in the last decade can be continued by the new government led by Prabowo Subianto and Gibran Rakabuming Raka. After the transfer of power, let's hope that Jokowi's achievement and legacy will help the new government bring Indonesia closer to justice and prosperity for all. Prabowo Subianto and Gibran Rakabuming Raka were officially inaugurated today as the new president and vice president for the next 5 years. A historic event that will start a new chapter in the journey of the nation.
Presiden dan Wakil Presiden nomor urut 2, Haji Prabowo Subianto dan Gibran Rakabuming Raka sebanyak 96.214.691 suara.
Prabowo Subianto and Gibran Rakabuming will be officially inaugurated as the President and Vice President for 2024 to 2029 during the plenary meeting of the People's Consultative Assembly at the Parliamentary Complex in Jakarta today. The ceremony will mark the transfer of government from President Joko Widodo and Vice President Ma'ruf Amin to elect President Prabowo and Vice President Gibran, who is also the oldest son of President Joko Widodo. Chairman of MPR Ahmad Muzani said Prabowo and Gibran will go to the State Palace in Jakarta later on the day to attend a ceremony to mark the transition of the national leadership from President Joko Widodo and Vice President Ma'ruf Amin. Prabowo will then deliver his inaugural speech as the country's 8th president. Prabowo will become the country's oldest president at 73 years old when he begins his 5-year term, while Gibran, now 37 years old, will become the youngest vice president in the country's history. The transfer of national leadership runs smoothly and no major changes are expected from the new administration. In fact, Prabowo, who promoted a continuity of government as his main theme of his presidential campaign, will reappoint at least 16 of Jokowi's key ministers in his cabinet. Although there will be no major problems in the transition process, a number of challenges have already awaited the new administration. In domestic politics, President Prabowo's ship will unlikely face rough sea thanks to his ability to persuade most of the country's major political parties to become part of his government.
Saya mengatakan dari awal, saya yakin pada saatnya PKB akan kembali mendukung saya.
However, he has to work an extra hard to meet the people's demand for justice. Many people are still disappointed about the country's weak legal enforcement, especially in dealing with corruption. As a former soldier, Prabowo is also expected to be able to overcome growing separatist movements in Papua. In the economic field, the new government will have to face more challenging situations, not only due to growing political tensions in the world, but also the decline in the industrial sector, which has led to the decline of the people's buying power. The rising uncertainties in the world have begun to affect the country's exports, while the decline in the buying power has also caused a decline in the country's middle class. With situation, the new government will have an uphill task to meet its target to boost the economic growth to 8% from 5% at present. Such a high growth target is needed to ensure Indonesia can get out from the middle class and become a developed nation in 2045, as stated in Indonesia Vision. With its rich natural resources and demographic bonus, in which the productive age population is more than the non-productive population, Indonesia has a golden opportunity to achieve the Golden Vision goals. as a demographic bonus is set to peak in 2041. Indonesia is racing against time to take the golden opportunity. But we believe the new president has the ability to achieve the Indonesian Vision 2045 goals and turn the country a better place to live, and more importantly, to bring prosperity to the people.
President Prabowo Subianto met with 49 prominent figures, including existing ministers, early this week as he was vetting them as his ministers in his administration.
The ministers who serve under President Joko Widodo's second-term administration arrived at Prabowo's private residence in Kertanegara, South Jakarta on Monday. Apart from incumbent ministers, politicians and professionals were seen arriving at the Kertanegara complex. Prabowo said that the vetting process has been underway for a long time. There were various discussions before making any decision. It has taken a lengthy process to vet the potential cabinet ministers. President-elect Prabowo, who is expected to take presidential oath on Sunday, said that these political figures have expressed their willingness to serve as ministers in his administration. The following is a list of 9 ministers of Indonesia Maju cabinet who were summoned by Prabowo at his private residence on Monday. Finance Ministers Sri Mulyani, Coordinating Minister for Economic Affairs Airlangga Hartarto, Minister of Industry Agus Gumiwang Kartasasmita, Minister of Energy and Mineral Resources Bahlil Lahadalia, Ministers of Trade Zulkifli Hasan, Minister of Agrarian Affairs and Spatial Planning Agus Harimurti Yudhoyono, Minister of Marine Affairs and Fisheries Sakti Wahyu Trenggono, Minister of Agriculture Amran Sulaiman, Minister of State-Owned Enterprises Erick Thohir.
President Prabowo Subianto has summoned 108 politicians, activists, and senior government officials to his residence at Jalan Kertanegara, Jakarta, recently to ask them to become ministers or deputy ministers under his government. Out of the 108 candidates, 11 are female figures, including Finance Minister Sri Mulyani under former President Joko Widodo's administration, and a number of senior executives of political parties and non-government organizations. Now, here are the profiles of the 11 women who would fill in ministerial posts at the new government.
So a lot of old faces.
Exactly, and a lot of speculation still about who will fill these ministerial positions. But any moment now, we hear it's going to be unveiled. So let's go now to the Merdeka Palace, I believe. Where the announcement will be made for the minister cabinet lineup. Let's have a look.
Mana telah saya umumkan bahwa setelah saya dilantik pada tanggal 20 Oktober 2024, malam harinya saya akan umumkan Kabinet Pemerintah Republik Indonesia periode tahun 2024-2029 dengan kesepakatan para ketua umum koalisi kami beri nama kabinet ini Kabinet Merah Putih. Dan saya ingin umumkan susunan Kabinet Merah Putih periode tahun 2024-2029 sebagai berikut. 1. Jenderal Polisi Purnawirawan Profesor Dr. Budi Gunawan, SH, MSI, PhD, Menteri Koordinator Bidang Politik dan Keamanan. 2. Profesor Dr. Yusril Iza Mahendra, Menteri Koordinator Bidang Hukum, Hak Asasi Manusia, Imigrasi, dan Pemasyarakatan. 3. Dr. Insinyur Airlangga Hartarto, Menteri Koordinator Bidang Perekonomian. 4. Profesor Dr. Pratikno, Menteri Koordinator Bidang Pembangunan Manusia dan Kebudayaan. 5. Dr. Haji Agus Harimurti Yudhoyono, MSc, MPA, MA, Menteri Koordinator Bidang Infrastruktur dan Pembangunan Kewilayahan. 6. Dr. Andes Haji Abdul Muhaimin Iskandar, MSI, Menteri Koordinator Bidang Pemberdayaan Masyarakat. 7. Zulkifli Hasan, SEMM, Menteri Koordinator Bidang Pangan. 8. Prasetyo Hadi, Menteri Sekretaris Negara. 9. Jenderal Polisi Purnawirawan Muhammad Tito Karnavian, Menteri Dalam Negeri. 10. Sugiono, Menteri Luar Negeri. 11. Letnan Jenderal TNI Purnawirawan Safri Samsudin, Menteri Pertahanan. 12. Profesor Dr. Kiai Haji Nasaruddin Umar, MA, Menteri Agama. 13. Supratman Andi Aktas, Menteri Hukum. 14. Natalius Pigai, SIP, Menteri Hak Asasi Manusia. 15. Dr. Andes Agus Andrianto, SHMH, Menteri Imigrasi dan Pemasyarakatan. 16. Dr. Sri Mulyani Indrawati, SE, MSc, Menteri Keuangan. 17. Profesor Dr. Abdul Muti, MED, Menteri Pendidikan. 18. Profesor Dr. Insinyur Satrio Sumantri Brojonegoro, Menteri Pendidikan Tinggi, Sains dan Teknologi. Saya lengkapi ya, tadi 17. Profesor Dr. Abdul Muti, MED, Menteri Pendidikan Dasar dan Menengah. Saya lanjutkan, Dr. Fadlizon, MSc, Menteri Kebudayaan. 20. Budi Gunadi Sadikin, Menteri Kesehatan. 21, Saifullah Yusuf, Menteri Sosial. 22, Profesor Insinyur Yasyarli, PhD, Menteri Ketenagakerjaan. 23, Abdul Qadir Karding, Menteri Pelindungan Pekerja Migran Indonesia, Kepala Badan Pelindungan Pekerja Migran Indonesia. 24, Dr. Haji Agus Gumiwang Kartasasmita, Menteri Perindustrian. 25, Dr. Budi Santoso, MSI, Menteri Perdagangan. 26, Dr. Bahlil Laha Dalia, SE, MSI, Menteri Energi dan Sumber Daya Mineral. 27, Insinyur Dodi Hanggodo, MPA, Menteri Pekerjaan Umum. 28, Marwar Sirait, SIP, Menteri Perumahan dan Kawasan Permukiman. 29, Yandri Susanto, MPD, Menteri Desa dan Pembangunan Daerah Tertinggal. 30, M. Iftitah S. Surya Nagara, SHMA, Menteri Transmigrasi. 31, Dudi Purwa Gandhi SH, Menteri Perhubungan. 32, Mutia Fiada Hafid, Bachelor Engineering MIP, Menteri Komunikasi dan Digital. 33, Dr. Insinyur Haji Andi Amran Sulaiman, Menteri Pertanian. 34, Raja Juli Antoni, PhD, Menteri Kehutanan. 35, Sakti Wahyu Trenggono, Menteri Kelautan dan Perikanan. 36, Nusron Wahid, SS, MSI, Menteri Agraria dan Tata Ruang, Kepala Badan Pertanahan Nasional. 37, Profesor Dr. Insinyur Rahmat Pambudi, MS, Menteri Perencanaan Pembangunan Nasional, Kepala Badan Perencanaan Pembangunan Nasional. 38, Rini Widyantini, SH, MPM, Menteri Pendayagunaan Aparatur Negara dan Reformasi Birokrasi. 39, Erick Thohir, Menteri Badan Usaha Milik Negara. 40, Dr. Wihaji SAG, MPD, Menteri Kependudukan dan Pembangunan Keluarga, Kepala Badan Kependudukan dan Keluarga Berencana Nasional. 41, Dr. Hanif Faisal Nurofik, Menteri Lingkungan Hidup, Kepala Badan Pengendalian Lingkungan Hidup. 42, Rozan Perkasa Ruslani, Menteri Investasi dan Hilirisasi, Kepala Badan Koordinasi Penanaman Modal. 43, Budi Ari Setiadi, MSI, Menteri Koperasi. 44, Maman Abdurrahman ST, Menteri Usaha Mikro, Kecil dan Menengah. 45, Widianti Putri, Menteri Pariwisata. 46 Teguh Rifki Harsyah, Menteri Ekonomi Kreatif, Kepala Badan Ekonomi Kreatif. 47 Hajah Arifatul Khairi Fauzi, Menteri Pemberdayaan Perempuan dan Perlindungan Anak. 48 Abe Nandito Aryo Tejo, Menteri Pemuda dan Olahraga. Selanjutnya, kementerian dan lembaga yang tidak di bawah koordinasi oleh Menko, yaitu 49 Profesor Dr. Haji Sanitiar Burhanuddin, Jaksa Agung. 50 Letnan Jenderal TNI Purnawirawan Muhammad Herindra, Kepala Badan Intelijen Negara. 51 Letnan Jenderal TNI Purnawirawan AM Putranto, Kepala Staf Kepresidenan. 52 Hasan Nasbi, Kepala Kantor Komunikasi Presiden. 53 Teddy Indra Wijaya, Sekretaris Kabinet. Daftar Wakil Menteri. Wamen. Oke. Baik, demikian adalah susunan para menteri dan kepala badan dari Kabinet Merah Putih, dan selanjutnya akan saya bacakan daftar wakil-wakil menteri. Baik, saya persilakan para menteri untuk bisa kembali. Tempatnya kurang rupanya. Ya, terima kasih. Ya, siap, melaksanakan tugas. Siap. Emang enak. Baru kita rasakan. Oh, Pres. Terima kasih Bu. Dengan menteri. Dan gitu dong. Yang heboh. Ya, sip.
Mas Babas.
cabinet lineup, very much awaited this moment. It's been a long day since this morning. 53 ministers in the red and white cabinet.
Red and white cabinet. So
let's go straight to our guest. Yes.
Your comments, any surprises? How are you feeling about it? Your prediction?
Okay, I think Foreign Minister Sugiono. So it will be a different culture, I believe.
Okay.
Can you elaborate a little bit?
Because he's no longer a military man, but his background and his network possibly will be from that angle. And he's one of the trusted person of Prabowo. So extension of Prabowo will be through him. So I expect that those haven't been mentioned yet, the deputy ministers would maybe balance his position, in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Somebody who has more knowledge and network with the diplomatic corps. And then, if you notice, I also noticed some ministries are broken into pieces, broken down, like hukum, law, and then human rights, now separate, and then immigration, and
also a separate
It used to be one ministry. And I wonder, usually, if
and
you're
also
talking
forestry and
environment,
yeah.
And then labor and migrant workers. Usually, migrant workers is just an agency. Now it gets a ministry
Same
position.
with education as well. Now we have two ministries.
Education, now two ministry, higher education and middle basic education. And then for pekerjaan umum, public works. Public works is now split
separate with public housing.
And from desa as well, right? Desa is a separate one. And then I'm surprised with transmigration.
Yes.
Are we going to transmigrate again?
Again, this nostalgic feeling, Budina.
Very nostalgic feeling.
Right.
We're going to see removal of people from Java. So, and lots of names from the previous administration from Joko Widodo's. And as he promised, all the party leaders get the position as coordinating ministry. So an expansion of coordinating ministry as well.
So first reaction, Budina, for the red and white cabinet.
So many people.
So many.
It will be a very big cabinet meeting, a long one. And I wonder how he managed the time, and get everybody.
Any surprises that you found?
Yeah, what's the biggest surprise for you?
My biggest surprise? No, not really.
Not really,
okay.
Not really.
Everyone is expected.
I'm surprised that Budi Ari is still there.
Okay.
Because he was not mentioned. And then PSI, Raja Juli Antoni is there, and he's responsible for forestry.
Right.
It's a very important sector to Prabowo because he has businesses in that.
Okay. Interesting.
It's also crucial to all the modern industries that we're talking about with regard to environment, climate change, and all the commitments that Indonesia's made to that. So forestry will be crucial. There will be a lot of international eyes on that sector. We talk a little bit about continuity because that's been very much the watchword through these recent months. We see a lot of continuity still here. It's amazing to see Sri Mulyani there lending her talents and experience to this cabinet. It's a gift to this cabinet, I would say, and to
have her steady hands.
Exactly,
still steering.
exactly. So that's a win. If we look at investment, ESDM, trade, industry, these are people we know. So these are people who've had a hand in shaping policy under Joko Widodo. There are two ways to look at that. On the one hand, they may feel that they are, they are right to continue in the way they were doing in the past. But on the other, they may feel that with the briefings they're getting from the president and the input he's been receiving, and perhaps they've been receiving too, it may be time for a review of those policy platforms, and hopefully some of the regulatory reform that we've been talking about will be picked up by some of these ministers, including those who are retaining those roles. I think for the size of the cabinet, we have these 7 coordinating ministers. They will be powerful, but they'll also have a lot of responsibility to manage those ministers below them. So a great burden on them. A lot of coordination will have to be done in order to manage this agenda. But a great deal of work has got to be done in the early weeks and months of this in order to make it viable for the first early part of this administration. I think one positive addition is Nasruddin Umar. I think, like Prabowo, an internationalist, someone who's been responsible for bringing Indonesia's religious culture and place in the world as an arbiter of conflict in a very positive space. So this is someone who's a leading scholar, a globalist, someone who's been involved in interfaith dialogue. So I think that's someone who can help us at a time when parts of the world are embroiled in conflict. And if we look back at the inauguration and the events of this morning, the element that got the largest cheer from the room was in fact Palestine. So if anyone can bring some pressure to bear on that conflict from Indonesia, perhaps it's someone like Nasruddin Umar. So I was pleased to see that.
All right.
Wow.
Now, you spoke extensively, Ian, about the need to streamline and do reform on regulatory, especially for doing business in Indonesia. Seeing the lineup here, are you optimistic that that can be done in the next administration?
A lot of these people are aware of the problems, and they've been in the fora, the conferences, the seminars where these things are discussed. So it will be no surprise to those people, particularly in those key industries of industry, trade, investment, ESDM, etc. So I'm hoping they've got the message and they're open to hearing from the international chambers, Kadin, Apindo, etc., embassies and industry associations that will help to promote that positive investment climate.
Okay. Thank you so much, Pak Ian, Bu Dina.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
Time is against us, but we deeply enjoyed our conversation today.
Yes.
And
Thank
we
you
hope
so
to
much
see
for
you
being
again.
so generous with your time and insights. We truly appreciate it. I think you've put the special in our special report this evening.
Indeed.
Thank you, Dina and
Well,
Ian.
it's time for us to say goodbye. Thank you so much for staying close to TVI World. My name is Uli Herdi.
And I'm Siska Becker. Until next time, take care. And again, our heartfelt congratulations to Bapak Prabowo Subianto and Gibran Raka Buming Raka. May you lead Indonesia to that prosperity that we all strive for. Thank you very much. Until next time.
Take care. Bye-bye.